I mean, just to stop by without calling people.
26 meeting in the
When he does all this, it's a
Planning
chair
Commission.
watches TV. That's what he does.
Would you please rise and join us in the recitation of the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, okay, sure.
Does anybody want to make any changes or corrections to it? Could I have a motion for approval of the agenda as presented?
Motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Is there a second to that?
Some of the stuff
Okay, we have a motion to approve the agenda and a second. We will signify our aye by saying aye. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay, so the agenda is adopted. Okay, we are going to review the minutes of the July 23rd, 2026 meeting, which are attached to your meeting packet. Does anybody have any changes or corrections that need to be made to that? I didn't see any. Okay, could we have a motion then to approve the minutes as prepared?
I
Oh,
ask that we accept them.
all these people?
okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of the July 23rd, 2026 meeting. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. The agenda, or the minutes are approved. Okay, now the big one. We have received, and I think many of you are aware, that there is a proposed ordinance now for our consideration. And what we are going to do on this is we are going to go through it line by line. It is a laborious process. Many of you will be asleep before we get beyond the definitions. I may even be asleep before we get beyond the definitions, but we're going to do it. And then we're going to do it for 2 hours. 8 o'clock is going to be our cutoff time. At the end of that 8 hours, we will, at the end of 8 o'clock, not 8 hours. At the end of that time, we will open it up for public comment, where you will be able to come and comment on anything that you have heard tonight, anything that you have heard that we have covered. Because this document is some 39 pages long, we're not going to get through it tonight. So if you have a question on something that's coming later, save that for a later meeting. And so we will have 4 minutes. You will have the opportunity to comment. Please, again, please make your comments in good faith. Keep it civil, and we'll get through it. And then at the conclusion of that, we will put a big mark on our packets, and we'll come back to it at the next meeting. All right? With that, Planning Commissioners, I'm going to suggest that we turn to page 1, that being the definition of, starting with energy systems, draft 1 zoning ordinance amendments, August 2026. This would be page 9 of your packet. And then I'm going to read until my voice gives out. If anybody has something that comes out as I'm reading, please stop me, any of the planning commissioners, and we'll deal with that. Otherwise, I'll just continue to go on and until I have to ask somebody else to read. And then at the end of the 2-hour time limit, we will open it up for our public comment. All right. Section 49.290, energy systems. The purpose of this section is to establish minimum requirements and regulations for the construction, erection, placement, location, maintenance, modification, operation, and decommissioning of principal use energy systems and private accessory energy systems in the township in a manner that promotes economic development and ensures the protection of the health and safety and the welfare of the public, while also avoiding adverse impacts to important areas such as agricultural lands, residential areas, endangered species habitats, conservation lands, and other sensitive lands. Paragraph A, definitions. Battery energy storage systems, BESS, BESS, an electrochemical device or assembly that stores energy and is capable of providing that energy to an electrical load. This includes all associated electrical, mechanical, and fire protection components.
Chair,
Yes.
are we saying that, oh, I'm sorry. Are we saying that battery storage is only electrical, chemical, and we're eliminating any other type of battery storage? Or?
What other
Well,
storage systems?
I guess
are you-
I'm thinking of a broader definition of storage. There's pumped hydro, there's many different ways you can actually pump into the ground in the aquifer and then pull it back out again as a storage system. So we're only addressing the electrochemical systems.
I think it's just the definition that is used for BESS here, so it's just the sentence that is an electrochemical device or assembly is just defining the term
What BESS?
BESS. I don't think it's limiting us to any other storage systems yet. It's just defining what the system is, what that particular system is.
Thank you.
But you're right.
There is I forgot about the second one.
Okay, moving on. Next paragraph. Battery management systems, BMS, the electronic system that manages a rechargeable battery by monitoring its state, calculating secondary data, reporting, protecting the battery, and controlling its environment. Central station monitoring. The monitoring of fire detection system signals by a listed central station service alarm system as defined by the National Fire Protection Act, that's NFPA 72, that receives alarms from the BESS site and provides timely notification to the fire department. Emergency Operation Plan, EOP, a written plan developed by the ESS owner or operator that establishes procedures for ESS personnel to follow during emergency conditions, including safe shutdown, system isolation, and coordination with emergency responders, required under NFPA 855, Section 4.3.2.1. Emergency Response Plan, ERP, a site-specific written plan satisfying NFPA 855 Annex G, as in GOAT, developed in coordination with the fire chief that provides first responders with the information and procedures needed to safely manage an ESS incident, including thermal runaway, fire, explosion, and chemical release events. The ERP supplements the EOP and is directed specifically towards emergency responder operations. Energy Storage Systems, ESS, a system that absorbs energy, stores it, and discharges it at a later time to provide electrical power or grid services. Scott, I think this addresses your concern.
Yes, thank you.
As used in this ordinance, ESS refers to stationary systems inclusive of BESS. Energy storage system does not include fossil fuel storage or power to gas storage that directly uses fossil fuel inputs. Energy storage systems are classified as follows. Number one, energy storage system, private accessory. An energy storage system that is an accessory use that is intended to primarily serve the needs of the consumer on site. For purposes of this ordinance, an ESS with a capacity of greater than 200 kilowatts is considered a principal use.
I had a question on this one.
Yes.
I think this makes sense for residential use, but when we're talking about a commercial area, does that mean any kind of private use energy? Let's say if you were wanted to put solar panels on a university building, would it then be too many kilowatts of storage to support a use like that with this definition for an accessory? Or do we need separate definitions for residential accessory versus commercial accessory?
The way it's drafted, it's not meant to distinguish, like if a business has a system that serves just their facility or a homeowner has one for their electric vehicle or.
Right, but the size would mean that any kind of business application would then be outside of the private accessory.
Well, it depends on the
definition.
size that the business has at their property. I mean, if a business has a large one and they back up to a neighborhood, we're gonna want some protections for the people in that adjacent neighborhood.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I guess maybe is there a scale, is there a commercial definition or utility definition for, like, let's say it's a school or something like that, that's different than the commercial, large-scale BESS that we're talking about from a development standpoint? Like an energy company BESS is different than what we would use for an individual site in an industrial or commercial application.
I don't really understand your question, but if you could send it to me, then I had some examples, I just can't find them right now, like what a typical generator might have for a business. I just can't find my notes right
Okay.
now.
All right, I'm going to move on. Number two, energy storage system principal use. An energy storage system that is a principal use or co-located with a secondary principal use and that is designed and built primarily to connect to the transmission grid, but may also serve another principal use. Exposure. Any lot line, public way, building, structure, occupied space, stored combustible material, hazardous material, high-piled stock, or other condition that presents a fire, explosion, or life safety hazard in proximity to the ESS. Factory acceptance test.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I wonder if I could go back to the energy storage system types just quickly. If we had a data center, I hope not, but if we had one, that would be a private use, wouldn't it? So the size becomes more important than the use, I would think. Do I understand it correctly?
Yeah, but that wouldn't apply in this case. The data centers don't fit in under this ordinance. Is that what you're asking?
Right. What I'm asking is a data center would have a much larger battery need beyond 200 kW, I'm sure. And so that fits for the size of commercial, residential, whatever, versus if you're going to go above a certain size, then you fall into the principal use.
Correct. And that's what Jody's going to bring back to the planning commission is some indications and some examples of where that line is at, where
Okay.
you might have it for commercial use. But again, you don't want a large, you wouldn't want a 500 or 600 kilowatt system running as a accessory use running
Like a
something
private, yeah.
without being regulated by the ordinance.
Right. And just for clarification as well, does a power wall in somebody's house constitute a system?
What's a power wall?
It's a Tesla battery.
It would be a private use energy storage system, but to the best of my knowledge, consumers Consumers Energy, which is the dominant provider in this area, caps the amount that you can store privately at 110% of your historic average generated.
Okay,
I'm sorry, that was a little nerdy.
thank you.
Sounded good to me. All right, I'm moving on. Factory acceptance test, FACT. A verification process performed at the manufacturer's facility prior to shipment to confirm that the ESS meets specified performance, safety, and quality requirements. Fire mitigation personnel, hazard support personnel. Qualified personnel designated by an ESS owner or operator who possess knowledge of the specific ESS installation and its associated hazards, and those who are available to be dispatched to support local emergency responders during an ESS incident. Fire Response Plan, an FRP. As used in this ordinance, Fire Response Plan encompasses both the Emergency Operations Plan, EOP, and Emergency Response Plan, ERP, together forming a complete framework for the ESS incident preparedness and response required by this section. Definitional codes. IFC, International Fire Code. LEG, LEG, the equivalent average sound level for the measurement period. MISO, M-I-S-O, the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator. MPSC, the Michigan Public Service Commission. NFPA, the National Fire Protection Association. NFPA 70, the National Electrical Code. NFPA 72, the National Fire Alarm and Signaling Code. The NFPA 855, Standard for Installation of Stationary Energy Storage Systems. Network Operations Center, NOC, a centralized facility staffed by trained personnel with working knowledge of the ESS and site, responsible for 24/7 remote monitoring of the battery management systems, BMS, alarm notifications, and immediate communication with the site owner, operator, and upon request, the fire department. Non-participating property, any property that is adjacent to a participating property. Occupied community building, a public library, community center, or other similar building that the applicant knows or reasonably should know is used on a regular basis as a gathering place for community members. See also sensitive land uses. Participating property, a solar energy system, energy storage system, or wind energy system host property or any real property that is subject to an agreement that provides for the payment of monetary compensation to the landowner from a system owner or affiliate, regardless of whether any part of the system is constructed on that property. Prime farmland, land as determined by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Natural Resources Conservation Service Soil Survey Geographic Database, that's SSURGO, that has the best combination of physical and chemical characteristics for producing food, feed, forage, fiber, and oilseed crops, and is also available for all of these uses. The land could be cropland, pasture land, rangeland, forest, or other land, but not urban built-up land or water. It has the soil quality, growing season, and moisture supply needed to economically produce sustained high yields of crops when treated and managed, including water management, according to acceptable farming methods. In general, prime farmlands have an adequate and dependable water supply from precipitation or irrigation a favorable temperature in a growing season, acceptable acidity or alkalinity, acceptable salt and sodium content, and few or no rocks. They are permeable to water and air. Prime farmlands are not excessively erodible or saturated with water for a long period of time, and either they do not flood frequently or are protected from flooding. Examples of soils that qualify as prime farmland are Palouse silt loam, 0 to 7% slopes, Brookston silty clay loam, drained, and Tama silty clay loam, 0 to 5% slopes. Remote outdoor installation. An ESS installed outdoors and located not less than 100 feet from all buildings, lot lines, public ways, stored combustible materials, hazardous materials, high-piled stock, and other exposure hazards as identified in IFC Section 1207.8.1. Site Acceptance Test, SAT. A verification process performed at the installation site following commissioning to confirm the ESS operates correctly in its final installed configuration. Sensitive land uses. A use or facility where exposures to SES or ESS-related hazards would pose heightened risk, including but not limited to residences, schools, licensed child care facilities, hospitals, nursing homes, and places of assembly. See also occupied community building. Solar energy system, SES, a system that captures and converts solar energy into electricity for the purposes of sale and not for use in locations other than solely the solar energy system property. A solar energy system includes, but is not limited to, the following equipment and facilities to be constructed by an electric provider or independent power producer: photovoltaic solar panels, solar inverters, access roads, distribution, collection, and feeder lines, wires and cables, conduits, footings, foundations, towers, poles, cross arms, guy wires, and anchors, substations, interconnections, or switching facilities, circuit breakers and transformers, energy storage systems, overhead and underground control, communication and radio relay systems, and telecommunication equipment, utility lines and installations, generation tie lines, solar monitoring stations, and accessory equipment and structures.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
would you like a break from reading?
that'd be great. Do you want to take it over, Mike?
I will take the next break.
Thanks.
Solar energy systems are classified as follows. 1. Solar energy system, private accessory. A solar energy system with a building-mounted and/or ground-mounted collector array and related apparatus intended to generate electricity only for the premises on which the system is located, and in some instances on neighboring premises, and not primarily for connection to a utility power grid, provided this term is not intended to include a solar energy collector device not exceeding 5 square feet in area. 2. Solar energy system principal use. A solar energy system with a nameplate capacity of more than 2 megawatts for the primary purpose of off-site use through the electrical grid or export to the wholesale market.
I had a question on the beginning of this definition seems to indicate that you have to be selling the energy, but then the sub-clauses include private use, so I thought those were conflicting.
It's interesting because, I look at the system I use in my house. My
Right.
house, technically, I sell it to the grid. However, I do know people who use it to charge power walls or the like. So I understand that. And I think that's what they were trying to encompass, but I'm not sure on that.
It seems like maybe we just need to reword so it's inclusive of both kinds and not limiting to solar conversion simply for the purpose of sale or for different uses on or off-site in the broader definition, and then the private accessory and principal use, or maybe there needs to be a third one here, kind of are the differentiators.
Yeah, in particular, and not primarily for connection to a public utility power grid is the part I think that is of question, because most people with solar, it is connected to the grid.
Yeah, like you don't necessarily have an option.
You just turned your mic off.
You don't necessarily have the option to do one or the other, right?
Right.
So work on the not primarily, try to reword that phrase.
Yeah, or I don't know, like in the definition of it, does the purpose need to be part of the definition?
Well, you have to distinguish, if someone builds one just to sell it to the grid, then it's a principal use.
Yeah, but it's a solar energy system regardless of why they're building it, and
Right,
then
it's the
the
definition up above
uses. Yeah.
that's the issue,
Yeah.
because it says in there that it's solely for sale or for use in locations other than solely the solar energy system
Okay,
property. So
gotcha.
we have to,
Well,
that has
we
to be
will fix
broadened,
that.
and then you can have the individual, the private accessory versus the principal use definitions. That's what's gonna be tweaked. Good catch. I'll try. Unfortunately, I had throat surgery about 20 years ago, and it's never gotten better.
Are we comfortable with moving on? Thank you. Number 2, solar energy system, principal use. A solar energy system with a nameplate capacity of more than 2 megawatts for the primary purpose of off-site use through the electrical grid or export to the wholesale market. Specialty crop farm. Land other than prime farmland that is used for the production of specific high-value food and fiber crops. It has the special combination of soil quality, location, growing season, and moisture supply needed to economically produce sustained high quality and/or high yields of a specific crop when treated and managed according to acceptable farming methods. Examples of such crops are citrus, tree nuts, olives, cranberries, fruit, and vegetables. Definition is adopted from the USDA definition of unique farmland. Thermal runaway, an exothermic chain reaction within a battery cell in which self-heating causes a cell to reach a condition of uncontrolled, self-sustained temperature increase, which can propagate to adjacent cells and lead to fire, explosion, or release of toxic gases. Thermal propagation, the spread of thermal runaway from one cell to adjacent cells, modules, or enclosures within the same ESS. UL 9540, Underwriters Laboratories Standard for Energy Storage Systems and Equipment. UL 9440A, Underwriters Laboratories Standard for Safety for Test Method for Evaluating Thermal Runaway, Fire Propagation in Battery Energy Storage Systems. Wind Energy System, WES, a system that captures and converts wind into electricity for the purpose of sale or for use in locations other than solely the wind energy system property. Wind energy system includes, but is not limited to, the following equipment and facilities to be constructed by an electric provider or independent power producer. Wind towers, wind turbines, access roads, distribution, collection and feeder lines, wires and cables, conduit, footings, foundations, towers, poles, crossarms, guy lines and anchors, substations, interconnection or switching facilities, circuit breakers and transformers, energy storage systems, overhead and underground control, communications and radio relay systems and telecommunications equipment, monitoring and recording equipment and facilities, erosion control facilities, utility lines and installations, generation tie lines, ancillary buildings, wind monitoring stations, and accessory equipment and structures. Wind energy systems are classified as follows. 1. Wind energy system private accessory. A wind energy storage system that is an accessory use that is intended to primarily serve the needs of the consumer on site. Wind energy system principal use. A wind energy system for the primary purpose of off-site use through the electrical grid or export to the wholesale market.
I had the same question about this one. It has the purpose for sale in the broader definition.
And then I see under private accessory, I inadvertently stuck the word storage in there, so it's a wind energy system, not wind energy storage system. So
Good one.
eliminate that word storage in the next draft.
B, general provisions, principal use energy system. The application for approval of a principal use energy system shall be made according to the procedure for special uses set forth in section 65.40 and the application guidelines set forth in this section. Any application for principal use energy system shall contain all the following. Each item listed below shall be provided as an exhibit and numbered to correspond with the subsection it addresses. An incomplete application will not be accepted. 1. The complete name, mailing address, email address, and telephone number of the applicant and property owners. 2. The planned date for the start of construction and the expected duration of construction. 3. The submission shall include content responsive to all the following, to the extent not otherwise provided pursuant to the below referenced sections. A description of the energy system, including a site plan as described in section 64 of this ordinance and this section. All information and supporting materials relied upon by the applicant to demonstrate compliance with the site plan approval standards as specified in this ordinance shall be provided. 1. Site selection. This land use shall not unreasonably diminish farmland, including, but not limited to, prime farmland, and to the extent that evidence of such farmland is available in the evidentiary record, farmland dedicated to the cultivation of specialty crops. 2. A map of all properties upon which any component of a facility or ancillary feature would be located, showing current land use, tax identification number, and owner of record of each property. Identify any parcels within the facility boundaries participating on farmland development rights agreement, Michigan Farmland and Open Space Preservation Program, PA 116. Additionally, for wind energy systems, all properties within 2,000 feet of such properties, and for solar energy or energy storage systems, all properties within 1,000 feet. This should indicate the location of all existing structures and shall identify such structures as occupied or vacant, and their use if occupied. This should also include the identification of land being used for agriculture, including the cultivation of specialty crops, according to the publicly available data. I did have a question on this. The difference between the 2,000 and 1,000 feet. The 2,000 feet was solar or energy storage systems, and then it said properties within 1,000 feet. I was just confused on the difference between the 2,000 and 1,000 feet.
Oh, that came from the model ordinance for the U of M Graham Institute of Sustainability.
I'm going to guess that it had something to do with the height of the wind
turbine.
wind
And
turbines and the
the
distance that they can be
visibility.
seen,
Yeah.
visibility.
Just wanted to clarify that.
Yep.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Yes.
If we look at site selection, what if we have a farmer that says, I want to sell my land and use it for this? Does the site selection say that farmer is not allowed?
The farmer wants to sell a piece of property for use of an energy system?
Correct. Is his site not allowed, or her site?
Well, it may or may not be. It's got a lot of hoops it's got to jump over.
Well, by the very criteria of being farm land.
Well, keep in mind that that's one factor. That doesn't necessarily exclude that property. That's one factor.
Okay.
You have, they have to show that it doesn't unreasonably diminish agricultural land. That's consistent with what's in the state statute and what the state of Michigan requires. So this is consistent with what MPSC would look at as well.
Does that mean like if they were to finish using it, could be returned to farmable land, or what does that mean?
No, it doesn't mean that, but they do have to, with decommissioning, return the land back to what it was before or better. It's a subjective, it'll be up to this body. If you get a special exception use request someday, God forbid, then that will be one of your criteria that you look at.
Okay, thank you.
I shouldn't say that on the record.
Number 3, lot lines and required setbacks shown and dimensioned. Number 4, size and location of existing and proposed water utilities, including any proposed connections to public or private sewer or water supply systems. Number 5, a map of any existing overhead and underground major facilities for electric, gas, and telecommunications transmission within the facility and surrounding area. 6, the location and size of any existing or proposed substations or energy storage facilities accessory to the principal use. 7, staging areas and laydown yards. 8, the location and size of all surface water drainage facilities, including source, volume expected, route, and course to final destination. There is an inappropriate apostrophe there, just for clarification. 9, designated groundwater management zones, designated agricultural districts and flood-prone areas. 10, for solar energy and energy storage systems, depth of groundwater at the facility and within 1,000 feet of the perimeter fence. 11, recreational and other land uses that might be affected by the sight or sound of the construction or operation of the facility, interconnections and related facilities. Identify any wildlife or scenic corridors, open spaces, known archaeological, geological, historical, or scenic areas, parks, designated wilderness, forest lands, specialty farms, scenic vistas, conservation easements, wetlands, federal or state designated byways, scenic byways, nature preserves, wildlife sanctuaries, designated trails, major communication and utility uses and infrastructure, and institutional, community, and municipal uses and facilities within 1 mile of the property line.
For this one, I thought it would be also good to add adjacent waterways or bodies of water. We didn't have that on any of these.
Where would you insert that?
Probably after wetlands or
Yeah.
near wetlands.
Any other points on that number? Number 12, a map depicting the proposed facilities, adjacent properties, all structures within participating and adjacent properties, property lines, municipal boundaries, and the projected sound ISO lines, along with the modeled sound ISO lines, including the ordinance limit. See also Exhibit A for specific sound report requirements. 13, for wind energy systems, a map or schematic showing the area including sensitive receptors that will be impacted by shadow flicker for wind facilities, including ISO lines indicating areas expected to experience 30 hours or more per year of shadow flicker. B, a description of the expected use of the energy system. C, a description of the expected public benefits of the proposed energy system. D, a Phase 1, and if warranted by the findings of Phase 1, a Phase 2 environmental site assessment, including records of consultation with relevant state, tribal, and federal agencies. E, a qualitative assessment of the compatibility of the facility, including off-site staging and storage areas with the Go Green Oshtemo and 2045 Oshtemo Comprehensive Plan, including the expected direct and indirect impacts of the proposed energy system on the conservation of the environment, agricultural lands, historic resources, recreational resources, and natural resources, including wildlife and/or scenic corridors, and how the applicant intends to address and mitigate these impacts. The assessment shall identify the nearby land uses and shall address the land use impacts of the facility on recreational areas, schools, on residential areas, schools, specialty crop farms, civic facilities, recreational areas, and commercial areas. The scope of such assessment shall be established by the township's subject matter expert. The assessment and evaluation shall demonstrate to the Planning Commission's satisfaction that conflicts from facility generate noise, dust, traffic, and visual impacts with current and planned uses have been minimized to the extent practicable. I had a question on this.
So did I.
We had a question on this. It says established by the township's subject matter expert. Can we explain that a little better, who or what that would be referring to?
For this standard, it would probably be an environmental engineer, since in this letter E, we're talking about compatibility with the environment, agricultural land, historic resources.
Do we have a subject matter expert?
No, but if we were to get an application, a tremendous escrow would be required, and we would use that escrow to pay whatever consultants we need to bring in so that you can thoroughly review any requests.
Would it be better to say the township's selected subject matter expert?
Sure, yeah, because then it doesn't sound like someone's on staff, yeah.
My question was similar to that in terms of where these people are coming from and who actually makes the selection. Is that out of the planning department of the expert?
Well, we wouldn't ask
Because
the
they aren't
applicant to.
staff. They aren't staff and they aren't in-house, right?
Yeah, your planning director would make a recommendation, and then it would be up to this board to determine who to engage in the way of expert or experts. And in fact, on this subject, I would say subject matter, let's put parentheses S. There may be multiple. We may have
Yeah.
Right.
an environmental
Right,
expert.
yeah.
You might have a hydrogeologist to deal with the water issues. You could have multiple experts that would have to bring in if an application is filed.
Right, because my question then goes like, the same references in the next section in F. So the expert could be different depending upon the circumstance and what the need is.
Yeah.
right?
Correct.
Okay.
Would the credentials of said expert have to be approved by this body?
If the planning commission is going to engage that person, I would say yes. I would expect a recommendation to be presented, and that the planning commission would select the expert.
Would it be worth adding an appendix that just outlines that process?
Wouldn't it have to go to the township board ultimately?
I don't think so, because it wouldn't be township funds paying for the individual. It would be coming directly out of escrow.
Okay.
No, I
And they
think,
would be reporting to this body, and this
Correct.
body's work would then be presented to them, but we would submit that this body accepted this individual as a professional on this subject matter.
that's the way I would envision it, yes.
Is that like written down someplace that the planning commission can employ?
No, but it's consistent with past practices. In other words, the township board doesn't hire additional planning experts. Your planner recommends them, this board engages them, and then they come and, so I think it's consistent with the practice of the township. And it would be consistent with what this is laid out in a way for the planning commission to be the recommending body and the principal reviewing body.
Okay, thanks.
Are there any other questions on E? I will continue to F, a qualitative assessment on the effects of the proposed energy system on the social well-being, equity, health, and safety of residents within 1 mile of the site, prepared by a third-party licensed professional with experience with social impacts of the proposed facility. Type, facility type.
I have a question, I'm sorry. The, so on that one, did the 1 mile come from something specific, or can we say more than that? Can we say it has to be more than 1 mile?
It's a subjective number. You can increase it.
Do you know why 1 mile was picked? Is that something that came out of a standard proposed?
No, I think I selected it
Yeah.
for this first draft.
Okay, all right. What would be appropriate, Deb?
I don't know, 1 mile just didn't seem like a lot.
And I think it differs somewhat based on each of the different energy systems. I think 1 mile for a solar array is very different than 1 mile from an energy storage system, which is also different from a wind turbine. So I think that I don't know of a specific number. I don't know if there's guidance on a specific number, but the impacts would, I imagine, be somewhat different.
So all, the 3 different wouldn't have to have the same measurement.
So we need some language that really is flexible, that allows us to increase or decrease that distance as we're dealing with a different energy system.
Hypothetically, or you could just use one for all of them, and that's something we would have to decide. I just don't know if there's anything to give us data on a specific number. I don't know.
Well, in thinking about the BESS, 1 mile doesn't seem to be enough, I don't think. I'm sorry. Considering, and thinking through if it was a BESS, I don't think 1 mile is enough.
If you have a larger distance, wouldn't the report just be less useful outside of the radius where it would be affected? Like a solar, if you get a 7 mile report on solar, it's just gonna say outside of 1 mile, it's no effect or something like that.
Are you concerned it'll dilute the findings, the impact, if the broader you go?
It's true. It could, average out to minimize the true impact.
Is there any information out there on this that we could reference that would help us come up with something? I don't know if there are other energy systems ordinances out there. Is there anything else that we could reference to perhaps provide some clarity on this?
I will do some research, and this was a suggestion at one of our public comments from a resident, so I'll reach out to her, since it was her suggestion, if she had some ideas.
Thank you.
Just one more thought along that line. The 1 mile radius seems reasonable in that any effects would probably happen within that 1 mile that's gonna happen out to 7 miles, unless there's some special place or some special group of people or something that's changing that at 2 miles upward or something. So it seems like 1 mile isn't a bad start.
I don't think it's a bad start, because what I think this is directed to is the operation of these systems, okay? And the closer you are to the system, the more chance you're gonna get from, like wind noise of the turbines going around, if it's a wind system, or the hum, if it's a BESS system. So, you know, the more expansive you make it, the less that's gonna impact the people on the outer fringe. And a mile seems to be, yeah, a pretty good compromise.
Okay,
I mean, that's how I would argue, but
no, that makes sense.
So at this point, we would just look for additional information, not make any changes at this point, but see if there's any other references that we could rely upon.
yeah, maybe Jody, if you've got some time, if you can give us some guidance on that when we come to the second draft.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thanks. Mike, you okay to continue to read, or you want a break
Oh,
from it?
no, I'm good for now.
Okay, very good.
If I start making up words, somebody just tap me out.
What bothers me is you're making sense, Mike, and that concerns me.
F, a qualitative assessment, oh, did we read F? Okay. G, a description of the portion of the community where the energy system will be located. H, a statement and reasonable evidence that the proposed energy system will not commence commercial operation until it complies with applicable state and federal environmental laws, including but not limited to the Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Act of 1994, PA 451, MCL 324.101 to 324.90106. I, evidence of consultation of the proposed system as presented to the township before submission of the application with the following county, state, and federal agencies before submitting the application, including 1, federal agencies where applicable, 2, Michigan Department of Natural Resources, 3, State Historic Preservation Office, 4, Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy, 5, Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development, 6, Kalamazoo County Drain Commission, 7, Kalamazoo County Health and Community Services Environmental Health Division, 8, Road Commission of Kalamazoo County, 9, Michigan Department of Transportation, Aeronautics Commission, and Kalamazoo Transportation Service Center, 10, owner of major facilities for electric, gas, and telecommunication lines.
Michael, I would add to, under federal agencies, I'll specifically also say Bureau of Indian Affairs, based on some comments we've received.
I was just going to bring that up, actually. Thank you. Do you have a question? Okay. J, the Soil and Economic Survey Report under Section 60303 of the Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Act, 1994 PA 1451, MCL 32460300303 for Kalamazoo County, and when the property is within 1,000 feet of Van Cal Street, Van Buren County. I had a question on this. That seems very site-specific. Should we expand that to something that would say all county borders, if we're looking at sites other than this one?
Well, all our other borders are within Kalamazoo County, except for our western one.
Thank you for clarifying that. Any other questions on that? K, MISO interconnection queue and power transmission information. Execution of a generator interconnection agreement must be anticipated within 12 months of application for special use approval due to time limits imposed in section 65.60. The following power transmission and interconnection information is required. 1. Queue number and other information providing the ability to identify the proposed facility within the interconnection queue. 2. Copies of all studies completed by the Regional Transmission Organization, including feasibility studies and system impact studies. 2.1. If a generator interconnection agreement has been executed, the executed generator interconnection agreement may be submitted in lieu of the studies. 2.2. The generator interconnection agreement and/or studies may be filed subject to a protective order and non-disclosure agreement. L. If the energy system is reasonably expected to have an impact on television signals, microwave signals, agricultural global position systems, military defense radar, radio reception, or weather and Doppler radio, should that say radio or radar?
Radar.
A plan to minimize and mitigate that impact. Information in the plan concerning military defense radar is exempt from disclosure under the Freedom of Information Act, 1976 PA 442 MCL 15.231 through 15.246, and shall not be disclosed by the township or the electric provider or independent power producer except pursuant to court order. Wind energy systems should provide evidence of prior consultation with nearby communication tower operators, including those of the United States Department of Defense. M. A stormwater management plan pursuant to Article 161. N. For solar energy and energy storage systems, a groundwater contamination risk assessment and spill contingency plan satisfying Article 162 groundwater and wellhead protection. O. Fire response plan.
Before you read O, that's a long one, on letter N, I realize we also have some language specifically under energy storage about groundwater contamination and spill contingency planning things, so I will be qualifying this to say, like, in addition to, and then cite that later section. So you'll see that in the next draft.
I have a real picky point, and I don't know the answer to it. If you go to L, the last sentence there, including those of the United States Department of Defense, do we have a Department of Defense anymore?
Now we have a Department of War.
Yeah.
So that is a technical, interesting point. Technically, for legal purposes, the Defense Department still exists. The Department of War has not been changed by Congress, but it is colloquially used by leadership currently.
Okay. So leave it that way.
Again, sorry for the nerddom.
Nerds serve a useful purpose on occasion.
O, fire response plan. In addition to the more specific provisions of section D.3.R for an energy storage system, all energy systems, a fire response plan shall include the following. 1. Evidence of consultation with the Oshtemo Township Fire Chief to ensure that the FRP is in alignment with acceptable operating procedures, capabilities, resources, etc. 2. A description of all on-site equipment and systems to be provided to prevent or handle fire emergencies. 3. A description of all contingency plans to be implemented in response to the occurrence of a fire emergency. 4. For wind and solar projects, a commitment to conduct or provide funding to conduct site-specific training drills with emergency responders before commencing operation and upon request while the facility is in operation. Training should familiarize local fire departments with the project, hazards, procedures, and current best practices. 5. For energy storage products, a commitment to review and update the FRP at least annually with the Oshtemo Township Fire Department, first responders, and Kalamazoo County Emergency Manager. including Van Buren County for projects located within 1 mile of the border between Kalamazoo County and Van Buren County. 6, a commitment to offer to conduct or provide funding to conduct full-scale, site-specific training drills with emergency responders before commencing operation and at least once per year while the facility is in operation. Training should familiarize Oshtemo Township Fire Department and other local fire departments and emergency responders with the project, hazards, procedures, and current best practices. I had a question on a commitment to offer wording. Is that the best wording to ensure that this is done?
Commitment to offer to conduct, to provide
What do you have in mind?
funding to conduct.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Oh, I just said, what do you have in mind? This is from the template.
You could strike
Require,
offer.
require would be a better word than a commitment to offer.
requirement to conduct, and just get rid of commitment to offer.
Just a commitment to conduct or provide funding to conduct?
I think it was drafted this way because some departments may not want to participate in
That's true.
that training.
Because
I
some
mean,
of the language I did strike is like, well, if the fire chief doesn't respond to you, then you're not required to do it. So that's some language I already took out of this.
I mean,
But if we required them to commit and we elected to defer that, our department, it would at least be, they would be required to, I don't know, required to offer. We would always reserve the right to decline, but I was just concerned about a commitment to offer.
Could we change it to a plan to conduct? And the plan could be whatever they together decide on? Or that they're
I
offering?
think you have to pin down that it's a requirement, because otherwise you have no guarantee that they'll do it if it's not required.
I don't think we would hold them in contempt if we as a township declined it, but I think that it should still be required.
You could
So I
stri-
don't know how to best wordsmith that.
you could strike to offer, just a commitment to conduct or provide funding to conduct a
Yeah.
full-scale site-specific training drill.
I think that would be
make
fine.
it,
And who chooses the expert that would be training them?
that would be in my opinion, be a combination of, they would bring their people to the table, we would bring to the table whoever we felt was necessary. Our fire chief, but any other expert that we felt was appropriate.
Okay, so we would have some input as far as who's going to do this training.
Yes, this does not contain it, but some of the other provisions contain, like 855 contains a recommended procedure for carrying out these functions. I think within that, we can establish a requirement that if necessary, the township engages any additional outside experts that we feel are necessary, should we have to deal with one of these things at some point in the future.
Okay.
Is their commitment really to provide updated information and funding?
That's later.
They're not really conducting the training at all? Because they're not selecting the expert, nor are they training anybody?
They would have to participate in any type of full-scale training
Right.
process. So when it says a commitment to conduct or provide funding to conduct, they may not necessarily have all of their personnel there, but they would have to have on-site personnel to assist us in conducting that full-scale site-specific training drill. Otherwise, we'd be training in the abstract. You've got to be able to open the site, access the site, show us where all the shut-off, electrical shut-offs are at, show us where all
Right.
the on-site water connections are at. So when it says, or provide funding, they could offer to provide their own expert to come in, review their site with us, and show us how to address the on-site specific fire training drills.
All right, at this point, we've been going at this for a little over 50 minutes, I think. So I'm going to declare a recess for about 5 minutes so we can stretch our legs, get away from this for a few minutes, and then come back and start again.
My eyes, thank you.
All right, we'll be. 10. Of course, in the middle of just a note to the commissioners, please remember, I've had a request to talk directly into your microphone. Apparently, it's not carrying as well to the audience as it should, so let's try and remember to talk directly into it. Okay, Mike, do you want to pick up, or do you need a break?
I'm good for a little bit.
Okay, very good.
We're going to resume at number 7. An analysis of whether plans to be implemented in response to a fire emergency can be fulfilled by the existing local emergency response capacity. The analysis should include identification of any specific equipment or training deficiencies in local response capacity and recommendation for measures to mitigate deficiencies.
I had a question or comment about that one. And what I'm asking about is the analysis identifies deficiencies, recommends suggestions, but what happens? I mean, who's responsible for doing anything? And, I mean, is the applicant going to fix them, or are they expecting us to fix them?
Well, I would say if they're not willing to mitigate the deficiencies, then your special exception use approval is going to be withheld.
Well, that's kind of where I was going. So that's really our hammer, if you will, that if they don't want to fix them, then we can probably deny them.
Yep.
Okay.
If the deficiency is identified at a later time, would we still be able to do that? Such as if any equipment failed, or there were any changes in the future due to financial constraints on the township, would we have any recourse to the,
I don't think under this section that would really address it. I think what would address it would be the fire response plan and the emergency response plan. And to the extent that there are any needs identified in there, we could address it in those two plans.
thank you.
While we're still on that, the question I would have then in regards to equipment deficiencies, if the analysis says that for whatever reason we don't have the equipment needed, who would be responsible for acquiring the equipment?
I think the expectation would be if the applicant wants approval and there's deficiencies, they're going to have to meet them, eliminate those deficiencies by providing necessary equipment. Or maybe it's funding more personnel, who knows?
Or public infrastructure, or whatever else is necessary.
It does say in recommendations for measures to mitigate. Should that wording be changed at that point, or such as responsible for mitigation?
Well, they might recommend several different ways to address the deficiencies. Maybe we need to keep the word recommendation in there, and through the multi-year process it may take to review one, we'll hash it out.
Yeah, I just didn't want an empty recommendation. I mean, for example, if they said you needed specialty equipment X, a special fire truck, for example. I'm not saying that's the case. We know fire trucks cost $1 million, minimally. We would want to make sure that they were responsible for mitigating that deficiency, not just recommending that a fire truck be provided.
Right, and that's where I think you would actually implement that requirement in your fire response plan. It would say, Acme Battery Energy Storage System will supply the township and maintain X piece of equipment during the term that it operates. That would have to be a condition of the fire response plan.
Excellent, thank you.
In fact, sneak peek, yeah, I had the fire chief read the appendix that is the fire response plan, and he wanted some specific language in there about that they buy the equipment and we house it here.
I can imagine that coming from the chief.
Yep.
Any other questions on 7? 8, a 24-hour emergency contact telephone number for use by emergency services providers. 9, the FRP must meet all requirements of the Clean and Renewable Energy and Energy Waste Reduction Act as amended MCL 460.1001 et seq. 10, other information the applicants find relevant. Changes to the design, type, manufacture, etc. of facilities or equipment after the initial filing must be analyzed to determine if changes are necessary to the FRP. Additional consultation with the Oshtemo Township Fire Department, first responders, and Kalamazoo County emergency managers is required for amended plans. P, emergency response plan. In addition to the more specific provisions of section D3Q for an ESS, an emergency response plan, ERP, shall include the following. 1, evidence of consultation with the Oshtemo Township Fire Chief and Kalamazoo County Emergency Manager to ensure that the ERP is in alignment with acceptable operating procedures, capabilities, resources, site accountability, etc.
Accessibility.
Accessibility. Thank you. 2, an identification of contingencies that would constitute a safety or security emergency. Fire emergencies are to be addressed in a separate fire response plan, FRP. 3, emergency response measures by contingency. 4, evacuation control measures by contingency. 5, community notification procedures by contingency, including mass emergency notification systems pursuant to NFPA 7.2. 6, an identification of potential approach and departure routes to and from the facility site for fire, police, ambulance, and other emergency vehicles. Number 7, a commitment to review and update the ERP with fire departments, first responders, and county emergency managers at least once every 3 years.
Is that often enough? Seems like it's something that they should have to do.
Annually?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, is they should.
Your mic's not on, Deb.
Sorry, what?
Your mic's not
Your
on.
mic's not on.
Sorry.
People can't hear you.
I thought that 3 years was too long. It should be more often than that, like annually.
At least a review annually seems appropriate.
Yeah, it wouldn't hurt to blow the dust off the,
Yeah. Because the emergency route might change, there might be a bridge collapses and we're waiting 3 years for MDOT to rebuild it, and so we need a new route. Yeah.
construction, yeah, it could be all kinds of contingencies on an annual basis.
8, an analysis of whether plans to be implemented in response to an emergency can be fulfilled by existing local emergency response capacity and identification of any specific equipment or training deficiencies in local emergency response capacity.
Same question I was asking about the fire plan. Any deficiencies that would be identified and we just have to deal with basically how the applicant's going to
Yes.
resolve the issue? Okay.
9, the means by which firefighters and other emergency services personnel can access and shut down the system on an emergency basis. This information shall be provided to the township or other appropriate agency managing emergency response. 10, a 24-hour emergency contact phone number for use by emergency services providers. 11, other information the applicant finds relevant. Changes to the design, type, manufacture, etc. of facilities or equipment after the initial filing must be analyzed to determine if changes are necessary to the ERP. Additional consultation with the Oshtemo Township Fire Department, first responders, and Kalamazoo County Emergency Manager is required for amended plans. Q, a decommissioning plan that includes the following. 1, An overview of the proposed energy facility, including 1.1, a detailed description of the proposed energy facility above ground and overview of the current land use of the site where the proposed energy facility will be located. 1.2, the expected useful life of the proposed energy facility. 1.3, a description of events which would trigger owner-initiated decommissioning. 1.4, a physical and chemical analysis of the soil at the time of development, which will be used to ensure soil is returned to a useful condition. Prior to conducting the analysis, the scope of the assessment, including the sampling, methodology, and number and location of samples and analytical perimeters, shall be established by the developer and approved by the township engineer or his or her designated subject matter expert. 1.5, a list of known hazardous substances at the time of development. 2, a description of the energy facility removal process, including 2.1, a proposed decommissioning schedule. 2.2, a description of facilities that will be removed and those that will be kept in place, including the reasoning and agreement with the property owner. 2.3, a description of removal methods and site clearance activities. 2.4, a description of anticipated hazardous substances used in the facility and removal from the site upon what is known at the time the application is filed. 2.5, a description of planned materials management methods and transportation plans, and an initial plan as to whether components will be sold, landfilled, recycled, or other, with the understanding that such plans will be updated periodically. 2.6, a description of resources, conditions, or activities potentially affected by decommissioning and mitigation measures to be employed during the decommission process. 3.
Under 2.5, what do we mean by the plans will be updated periodically? I mean, you're going to decommission this thing now, and you got to tell us how you're going to decommission it. And then, what do we expect, a weekly, a monthly, a yearly report? I mean,
Wasn't the plan, this is part of the application process, right? They have to provide this?
Provide their decommissioning plan,
Plan.
maybe every 5 years, because they might be swapping out like solar arrays, and technology might change in recycling, so it would make
Right.
sense to put a number on it.
Or perhaps chemicals change, such as going from a lithium ion to a sodium ion, or some other hereunto unknown chemical component. But I do think setting a number instead of periodically might be in our interest.
Do we know, what is the average life of one of these systems?
20
Is it-
years, wasn't it?
Was it 20 years?
Well, that depends. The individual, so if you're looking at like a battery energy storage system, individual cells may have to be replaced, or plates of cells may have to be replaced, but the entire system is estimated 20-year useful life, but each component would be upgraded during that or maintained during that. Is that correct, Jim?
Yes, and in fact, part of the procedure as you get further into the ordinance and further into some of the regulations will require that they notify you when different cells are replaced, if it's a battery energy storage. If anything changes along that line, they have to tell you what they've replaced it with, keep you up to date on what is there and what they're doing with it as far as disposal.
I believe we are on 3, is that correct?
Yes.
A description of the site restoration plan that returns the site to a useful condition similar to its pre-construction state. Process milestones and PA 116 restoration requirements should be detailed, including necessary steps to ensure soil is returned to at least as good or better condition with respect to organic matter, infiltration, compaction, drainage, and crop productivity. 4, a list of expected necessary permits for demolition or new temporary construction which may be required for component removal, and a statement that such permits will be obtained prior to the start date of decommissioning. 5. Details describing the financial assurance. 5.1. The type and manner of financial assurance the developer plans to provide. Cash is prohibited, subject to the terms of any future township approval and township approved decommissioning agreement. 5.11, bond. 5.1.2, irrevocable letter of credit excluding cash. 5.2, such financial assurance shall be expressly held for the benefit of the township. 5.3, the township must be notified in writing at least 60 days before the financial assurance is set to expire. Failure to provide proper notification and updated financial assurance information is a violation of this ordinance. 6. The following commitments and assurances shall be included in the decommissioning plan. 6.1. A commitment to provide decommissioning plan and financial assurance cost updates every 3 years. 6.2. An assurance statement that restoration will be in accordance with agreements with landowners. 6.3. A commitment and plan to coordinate with landowners and the township prior to beginning decommissioning activities. 6.4.
I'm sorry, can I interrupt you for a second?
Yes, please.
What is it, it says with landowners. I'm not understanding what that means. Aren't they own, whoever's gonna put these in, don't they own the land?
Sometimes they do long-term
Lease
leases
Yeah, a lot of times it's just a lease.
with a commitment to return it back to, I'm thinking of like some solar farms I've toured,
Okay. So they might not own the land.
Correct.
right?
Correct.
What happens if a company, let's say they install one of these things someplace, what if like in 5 years or whatever, the company goes bankrupt or something? How do we recover from that?
Well, if a company goes bankrupt, they would have to obviously seek the protection of bankruptcy court. The bankruptcy trustee would look probably to transfer the operation to another user. If not, it would go through the decommissioning process, and if they're bankrupt, we'd have to call their bond or letter of credit.
Okay. Just so we have something to fall back on.
I believe we were on 6.3. A commitment and plan to coordinate with landowners and the township prior to beginning decommissioning activities. 6.4. An assurance that decommissioning plan updates and cost estimates shall be filed with the township clerk. 6.5. An assurance that the financial assurance shall be updated according to required periodic decommission plan and cost estimate updates and maintained throughout the operational life of the facility. 6.6. Assurance that the owner will provide annual proof to the township clerk that the financial assurance remains sufficient and in effect. 6.7. A statement agreeing to provide a decommissioning completion report to the township within 60 days after decommissioning is complete. 7. The decommissioning plan shall include a decommissioning agreement that shall be executed and recorded at the Kalamazoo County Register of Deeds. The decommissioning agreement shall be executed and recorded upon issuance of a building permit, or if a building permit is not required, within 7 days prior to commencement of construction. A draft of the proposed decommissioning agreement shall be provided to the township clerk within 30 days of special use approval for township attorney review and approval. The decommissioning agreement shall follow a template available from the township clerk. 8. The decommissioning cost estimate shall include a detailed cost estimate for restoration of participating properties to useful condition similar to that which existed before construction, repair of drainage systems and damaged roads. It shall also include removal of above-the-surface facilities, foundations to a depth of 4 feet, and infrastructure that have no ongoing purpose. The estimate must include the following. 8.1. detailed cost estimates for removal of energy facility equipment and infrastructure, land restoration and reclamation, groundwater and soil remediation, hazardous waste disposal, and liability insurance requirements calculated by a third party with expertise in decommissioning to restore to useful condition similar to before the energy facility. 8.2, an estimate of salvage value for energy facility equipment and infrastructure calculated by a third-party licensed professional engineer with expertise in decommissioning. 8.3, an estimate of the cost to hire a decommissioning consultant to manage the decommissioning process in the event of owner abandonment or bankruptcy. R, a pre-construction sound report satisfying Appendix A, detailing the sound modeling results along with mitigation plans to ensure that the sound emitted from the facilities will remain below ordinance limits throughout the operational life of the facility. Post-construction sound monitoring protocol is required as part of the pre-construction sound report and shall satisfy Appendix A. S, solar energy systems and energy storage systems, a visual impact assessment prepared by a third-party qualified professional of the visual impacts of the proposed project, including a description of the project, the existing visual landscape, and important scenic resources, plus visual simulations that show what the project will look like, including proposed screening and landscaping, a description of potential impacts and mitigation measures that would help reduce the visual impacts created by the project. T, for solar energy systems and energy storage systems, a photometric plan to demonstrate compliance with dark sky-friendly lighting solutions. U, for wind energy systems, light mitigation plans, including exemptions requested for during the construction period. V, for wind energy systems, a report detailing the flicker modeling results with mitigation plans to ensure that flicker will remain below the limit listed in section D2E throughout the operational life of the facility. The report must be prepared by a qualified third party using the most current modeling software available and be based on real-world or adjusted case assessment modeling. The report must show the locations and estimated amount of shadow flicker to be experienced at all occupied community buildings and non-participating residences as a result of the individual turbines of the system. W, a community host agreement in the amount of $5,000 per megawatt of nameplate capacity, which shall be executed prior to commercial operation of the system. X, a property tax guarantee for consideration by the Township Board upon special use approval if granted by the Planning Commission.
Jim, I think this is mainly for you. What constitutes a property tax guarantee?
From my perspective, it's whatever we say it does. In other words, we're going to help prepare that and dictate what we expect from the developer.
Okay. Is it just mainly for whatever period of time the thing's in operation, they're going to guarantee us tax revenues of
Yes.
whatever amount of money? Okay.
How do you arrive at the, I mean, who assesses that?
Taxes.
I mean,
Well, there are currently operations like this, throughout the state and other states. I'm assuming what we would do is we would look at existing facilities, probably based upon their kilowatt output, and base our estimates on that as far as values. What we don't want to do, we don't want to get into is what has happened in other energy, not energy systems, but other state-ordered improvements in infrastructure, and then 3 years later, the State Tax Commission turns around and says, oh, no, we're going to, we're going to increase the write-off instead of decreasing the value, that 3% a year, we're going to do it at 25% a year, and in 4 years, these things aren't worth anything, and then you can't collect anything. from a tax standpoint. So,
I
right
guess
now,
why
that,
are- I'm sorry, go ahead.
right now, that seems to be something that that's within our control. One of the few things they haven't stepped on us about. And so we would want to come up with a consistent, I say consistent, a proposal that was supportable based upon the evidence that we have with regard to the value of these facilities. And we don't want them depreciated like overnight. And that's the fear that you have with some of this new technology. The state has stepped in and then told our assessor, oh, you're going to increase the depreciation over time, and then pretty soon the public gets little or no benefit from these quote advances and technical advances.
So is that assessing them differently than any other commercial venture?
Well, that's, again, is it? Yeah, treating them differently? Yes, but why? Because of the fear of the unknown. If you had to have one of these facilities, I don't want the State Tax Commission turning around in 3 weeks and telling us that we aren't going to generate any. If you have to have one of these facilities, and it's here, we want to make sure that there's a tax benefit and that it's not artificially altered after the fact.
If the state were to alter it, would this supersede that?
That would be,
That's
that
the
would be a
goal.
battle that we would take head on.
And I added this language, that was a recent recommendation from the Graham Institute for empowering communities, that communities start working this language into their ordinances.
Yeah, I would expect any agreement would say something to the effect that, regardless of anything that the state may do, you're agreeing to this, and so it's a contract between the two parties. And we would do everything we could to protect ourselves, protect the citizens, and protect the community. Again, if we have to have one of these things, we should get the revenue that we expect to generate if it's cited here.
Interesting.
Thank you.
One more question. Do we have risk of the state or the federal government declaring something, wind, solar, battery storage, whatever, as an essential service? We've watched essential services, we have hands off, essentially, don't we?
Well, in part, PA 233 has done that to us. So, do I think that's a possibility? Yes. Do I think if a court were faced with the question of whether these are an essential service, a court could very well make that determination. So, again, we're trying to cover our bases as best we can, systematically, cover every issue that we can think of, and this is one way to do it.
Okay, thanks.
Why? Installation and operational safety. The system shall comply with all of the following requirements. 1, the energy system shall be designed and constructed or for interconnection to a Michigan Public Service Commission or Mid-Continent Independent System Operator regulated utility power grid and shall be operated with such interconnection. 2, the energy system and all foundation elements shall comply with all applicable building and electrical code requirements and any applicable federal state regulations. The manufacturer's engineer or another qualified engineer shall provide written certification that the design, installation, including foundations, and interconnection is compliant with the manufacturer and industry standards, all applicable local construction and electrical codes, and any applicable federal state regulations. 3, other than transmission or distribution lines for interconnection to the electric power grid, all electrical wiring shall be buried underground except where the manufacturer's engineer or a qualified engineer employed by the utility that owns, operates the electrical power grid to which the energy system shall be interconnected certifies an underground wiring installation is not permitted by an applicable code and or applicable federal state regulation with attached complete documentation supporting any such certification. Z, a plan for third-party monitoring of the energy system with at least once weekly site visits while the system is being constructed and shall continue until all approvals have been issued by the appropriate regulating authorities. The independent third-party monitor shall resolve complaints and request immediate cessation of activities that the monitor can document are in material breach of any plan, permit, or agreement pertaining to the construction of the facility. The independent third-party monitor shall provide periodic reports to the Planning Commission and the applicant from the start of construction and continuing through the first 3 months of commercial operation. The cadence of reports will be determined by the independent monitor in consultation with the Planning Commission.
And again, that's supposed to be paid for out of the bond that we're going to ask to be posted on this?
It wouldn't be paid out of the bond, it would be paid out of their application fees, I believe. Because this is going to be something, the bond is usually what we're going to have for decommissioning.
Decommissioning, right.
I think this would be part of the
Agent
application
fees.
process, that they would provide sufficient funds to allow us to oversee the construction. Because it's like there are other large projects that have taken place in the township. We have a very good building official, we have electrical and plumbing inspectors, but this certainly wouldn't be anything that's within their daily bailiwick. And we would have to, again, go out and hire additional experts with a higher level degree in electrical engineering, plumbing, fire suppression, whatever it might be. They would then probably have an engineer oversee all the steps of this development, again, if it should take place.
But again, Jim, the third party's independent. If I'm hearing you correctly again, we as a township are not paying for it.
We are not paying for it, it's answering to this planning
Right,
commission.
but they
Correct.
report back to us.
Yes.
Well, I think we should qualify this and say it's us selecting the third-party monitor, not them selecting it.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
The independent
Make it
third-party
clear.
monitor determined by or approved by the
Yes.
Planning Commission.
Planning Commission, yeah.
AA, through the special use process, the Planning Commission shall require reasonable measures to minimize visual impacts by preserving existing natural vegetation, requiring new vegetative screening, or other appropriate measures. The Planning Commission shall determine such required visual screening measures on a site-specific basis pursuant to the landscaping standards of Section 55 and/or standards of Site 53. See, I might need a break soon. And/or standards for site plan approval as specified in Section 64 of this ordinance, as most applicable to the circumstances. In making this determination, the Planning Commission is specifically authorized to consider whether additional visual screening measures are appropriate where a system is proposed to be located on property adjoining a residential property.
Thanks, Mike, but I'm going to pull you from the mound. Ron, would you like to do a little reading for us?
Sure.
Thanks.
Let me get this a little closer.
What's that microphone?
All right. BB, if the system includes an access drive or drives for maintenance purposes, the surface of the access drive shall be permeable but still support the live load of fire apparatus unless on brownfield land or on an already paved surface at the time of application for approval, such as a parking lot or former building foundation.
I have a question there. Shouldn't it be able to support the weight of a fire truck even if it's brownfield land? And I may have misread that, I highlighted it, but it says a fire apparatus unless on brownfield land or on an already paved surface at the time.
Yeah, I think we need to move
We need to
live
fix-
load of a fire apparatus up in this sentence, because otherwise.
I don't want that exception.
Yeah,
Right.
that wasn't the intent. It was like if it's brownfield land, we don't want it to be permeable. So that's why, that's where the exception is, but we need to just move those words around.
Yes, all of the property must be able to support the weight of a fire apparatus. Thank you.
CC, except as otherwise depicted on and approved with the site plan, the area within which the system is located shall not be paved with asphalt/concrete or any other surface material that is impermeable to water other than for slab foundations for structures and equipment. This shall not apply to a system located on brownfield land or on an existing paved area, such as a former building slab or in an unused parking area where adequate parking remains for any other use on the site.
I have a question here. Specifically in terms of a BESS system, do we want permeable material? Or would it be better that there be an impermeable layer under such a system?
Well, you're gonna require that, aren't you? I mean, we have to have containment systems for these individual battery units?
I believe so, and I believe they're put on a pad.
Pad.
I just didn't know if, I was thinking site-wide, would it be wise to have some type of impermeable subsurface that prevented any type of material from leaking into the ground?
And Jody, why would we want a permeable surface in these areas?
Well, there is language later specific to energy storage about secondary containment of all stormwater and firefighting water for energy storage facilities.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to provide an exception here
Yeah.
to deal with that issue. Generally, I think what this paragraph was designed to do was provide for the restoration of the land. So the general concept was, you have the foundations of most facilities, like a wind or the posts that go down for solar, you want them taken down to 4 feet. You don't want a, 50-acre paved parking lot that you then have to tear up again. So I think that was the general intent of this, and we can address that with an exception for BESS facilities.
I had a question too. That makes sense for like a solar farm on previous green space, but for other solar applications, maybe in a commercial area where there are covered carports or some other form factor, this clause kind of seems to exclude that use.
Well, except the last sentence says, not apply to a system located on brownfield or an existing paved area such as a former building slab or unused parking area.
Yeah, but let's say I want to develop solar covered parking next to a new building that I'm building, right? I can't do that?
We could add that, just
Yeah,
so
we
there's
should
no
add that.
question, yeah.
In fact, frankly, if you're going to put those up, they should, a good example is the MSU parking lot.
Right.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
great use of
Or if
solar
that was
over
somehow
parking.
going to be incorporated into some other new construction.
Put
It
one
shouldn't
in.
be prohibited just because it wasn't
Good point.
parking lot before,
I'm sure Myers will have one up next week.
right? Well, theirs is already paved.
DD, no outdoor storage of parts, inoperable equipment, junk, or blight is permitted at the facility. The ground shall be kept in a manner compatible with the character of the area within which the facility is located. EE, non-motorized facilities shall be provided pursuant to the adopted non-motorized facilities map. We're to FF, construction information. Describe the project's proposed construction and installation methods, including 1, soil surveying and testing plans pursuant to Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Act, NREPA. 2, grading and excavation. 3, construction of temporary and permanent access roads, staging areas, laydown areas, and trenches. 4, stringing of cable and/or laying of pipe. 5, installation of electric transmission line, poles, and structures, including foundations. 6, depth of underground infrastructure must be at least 4 feet unless a lesser depth is approved by the Planning Commission. 7, post-construction restoration. 8, map showing the following. 8.1, the planned routes may be preliminary for cranes and other heavy equipment. 8.2, the location of any existing deeded easement granted to any entity within the footprint of the facility. 8.3, the location of known existing and proposed county and intercounty drains, drain easements, and underground drainage tiles, including data provided by the Kalamazoo County Drain Commissioner or the property owner as applicable and to the extent available. JJ, unanticipated discoveries plan. An unanticipated discoveries plan, UDP, that addresses anticipated impacts and plans to mitigate impacts to the environment and natural resources, including, but not limited to, sensitive habitats and waterways, wetlands and floodplains, wildlife corridors, parks, historic and cultural sites, and threatened or endangered species. If a sensitive habitat is identified, the Planning Commission shall require an impact evaluation. The UDP must include the following then. 1, a set of procedures to be followed if cultural resources are discovered. Examples of cultural materials include but are not limited to the following. 1.1, an accumulation of shell, burned rocks, or other food-related materials. 1.2, bones or small pieces of bone. 1.3, an area of charcoal or very dark stained soil with artifacts. 1.4, stone tools or waste flakes, for example, an arrowhead or stone chips. 1.5, clusters of tin cans or bottles. 1.6, logging or agricultural equipment that appears to be older than 50 years. And 1.7, buried railroad tracks, decking, or other industrial materials. 2, a set of procedures to be followed if human remains are discovered. 3, a contact list that includes the following. 3.1, contact for the State Historic Preservation Office. 3.2, contacts for tribal historic preservation offices in Michigan. 3.3, local project-specific emergency contacts, for example, Kalamazoo County Sheriff, Kalamazoo County Sheriff, Kalamazoo County Medical Examiner. You want to keep going, Al?
Well, does everybody want to go for another 10 minutes? Yeah, let's go. Let's try
Okay.
and get through a little more.
C, post-approval requirements and information. Completion report. Before commencing commercial operations, the applicant shall file a completion report with the township clerk certifying compliance with PA 233. This section, appendices, as well as any conditions imposed by the Planning Commission in granting approval. At a minimum, the completion report should include the following. A, finalized site plans, finalized schematics, and dimensional drawings. B, descriptions demonstrating compliance with section 49.290.B and 49.290.D for the relevant technologies included within the facility. C, a list and copy of all permits received, including the permitting agency, the date the permit was received, and conditions attached to each permit. D, mechanical completion certificates.
Can I have a question? Should we be saying, at a minimum, the completion report should include the following? Should it be shall include the following? It's kind of
Yes.
implying they have a choice.
Yeah, that's a great change.
Yes. It's not optional.
Okay. I think I'm down to E.
Yep.
Submit a post-construction sound monitoring report satisfying Appendix A as part of the required completion report. A sound monitoring report shall be submitted within 60 calendar days of end of the field data collection. F, conformity to approved plan. Sealed as-built survey and record construction drawings are required pursuant to section 64.90. G, contents of the annual report filed with the township clerk no later than March 31 each calendar shall include the following. 1, the facility name and address, the facility name, address, and parcel number. 2, the special use approval date. 3, the reporting period covered by the report. 4, the name, contact information, and role of the owner and operator submitting the report. 5, the amount of electricity produced per turbine or per parcel. 6, complaints received during the time period, as well as the developer/operator's response, including resolution and/or plans for mitigation. 7, outline of the operating conditions and performance of the facilities on the site, including non-producing ancillary equipment, structures, fencing, locks, gates, screening, and vegetative ground cover. 8, list of any failures of equipment or structures that took place during the period, as well as repairs that have been made during the time period or are planned or underway. 9, all material improvements made to the site or facilities during the period, as well as any planned improvements or planned changes to the site or facilities, including changes to fencing or ancillary equipment during the reporting period. The township retains the right to perform on-site inspections annually to coincide with receipt of the annual report. H, ownership and operator changes. For solar energy systems and energy storage systems, if the owner of the system changes or the owner of the property changes, the special land use approval shall remain in effect, provided that the successor owner or operator of the system assumes in writing all of the obligations of the special land use approval, site plan approval, and decommissioning plan. A new owner or operator of the system shall notify the township clerk in writing of such change in ownership or operator within 30 days of the change. I, approval timeframe and abandonment. The special land use and site plan approval shall be valid for a period of 24 months, provided that a building permit is issued for construction and construction is commenced. In the event that construction is not completed in accordance with the final site plan, as may have been amended and approved by the Planning Commission within 24 months after approval, the Planning Commission may extend time to complete construction for 12 months. If the owner and/or operator fails to perform substantial construction after 36 months, the approval shall expire. The system shall be considered abandoned when it ceases to operate consistently for more than 1 year. If the owner and/or operator fails to comply with decommissioning upon any abandonment, the township may, at its discretion, enter the property and utilize the financial assurance for the removal of the system and restoration of the site in accordance with the decommissioning plan.
I have a question. So their approval would be good for 24 months? Aren't typically our site plans approved for 1 year?
But you can extend an approval of a site plan for another
Right.
year.
Right. Well, we're giving them 2 years right off the bat here instead of the usual 1.
But they might still be in the MISO queue when they come to you. So we're just giving them more time to, they might not have their approvals to connect with the grid when they come to you. So that's why I added some more time.
Mr. Chairman, can I take us back to subsection H?
Sure. Ownership and operation changes?
Yeah, a new owner or operator shall notify the township clerk in writing of such change within 30 days of the change. If they change hands, I want to know who's running that thing the day it changes hands. Should we change that to say that they should notify us 30 days prior to the change in ownership?
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Doesn't mean it's going to happen, but.
Do we also need to mention there the financial assurance? I know it says all of the other things, but should we specifically point out or detail the financial assurance as well?
I think so.
I think also the emergency contact info for the ERP and the fire plans within 24 hours of, or in advance of any changes.
And I don't know about the wording, and I would lean on you, Jim, but I would say must provide us documented financial assurance guarantee prior to transfer, something along that line.
I know that Jody can do that.
Okay, 2, complaint resolution process is approved by the Planning Commission as a condition of approval must be established and includes the names of a designated developer/operator representative provided with the authority to resolve complaints, A requirement that the complaints are acknowledged within 2 business days, investigated within 5 business days, and corrected within 30 days. A dedicated phone number and email address for complaints, and website information instructing the public on the complaint resolution process. Both construction and post-construction complaint resolutions shall be addressed. 3, battery module or array placement. For solar energy systems and energy storage systems, any battery module or array replacement shall be properly managed pursuant to the removal process identified in the decommissioning plan.
Mr.
Replaced components shall not be stored at the facility.
Mr.
Thanks,
Chair,
Ron.
should we cease at this point?
It's just what I was gonna say. We're gonna call it right there for tonight. I'm going to open the floor to public comment. If you have any public comment on what you've heard tonight so far, please feel free to come up to the podium, identify yourself, and state what your question is. You have 4 minutes, and I just remind you to, keep it civil. Thank you.
Before we start the comments, my cover memo said that maps had been prepared, and that was a poor word to use. We really don't have any maps prepared. We've looked on our monitors of how the different data we're pulling in looks, but there's no maps prepared, so that was a wrong word. We're still gathering data from Eagle and other state of Michigan resources, Van Buren County, Kalamazoo County, Western Michigan University. Our zoning administrator, Ms. Harris, with the help of our outside GIS consultant from Prine and Newhoff, is getting all this data into a format, bringing it into our database and not limiting it just to our borders. That's why we've had to reach out to Van Buren County and the state to really get data all around the borders of this township. So we'll bring those forward at a future meeting.
Thank you. Okay. The floor is yours.
Do I need to turn something on? No. Good evening, Planning Commission and Board of Trustees who are watching this live feed. Here's the problem. When you tell the people, trust us, we're securing our energy grid while simultaneously keeping the terms, the negotiations, the projections, and the supporting information behind confidentiality walls, you're not asking for trust, you're demanding us to trust you. And the government does not get to demand blind trust from the people it serves. Look at the crappiest part of this ordinance draft tonight, a backdoor clause giving the township clerk unilateral authority to review and extend these utility-scale projects with 0 board oversight, 0 public hearings, and 0 democratic accountability. Why the clerk? Because a full board vote requires an open meeting and public record. Routing this through a desk clerk reclassifies a massive political decision as a quiet administrative action. It is a deliberate maneuver to bypass the Open Meetings Act, so corporate extensions can be signed in total silence. The people of Oshtemo are not shareholders in Next Era Energy. They don't get to have a seat in New Edge Renewable Power's boardroom. They do not get confidential briefings. They don't get NDAs. They don't get to negotiate the private land leases over at Sable Farms. We don't get the deal, we get the bill. And we get the thermal runaway risks. So to the people of Oshtemo, especially the families who live on West M Avenue and South Van Cal Street who are directly affected by these projects, and to our neighboring townships, the rest of my message is for you. You are not a nuisance. You are not an obstacle to economic development. You are not something to be managed or pacified after a deal has already been cut behind closed doors. You are the sovereign. Your government is supposed to work for you. Your elected officials work for you. Your regulators and commissioners sitting at this dais tonight work for you, not energy corporations chasing state-subsidized billions. Any corporate entity seeking access to our land, our grid, and our community by running to Lansing to hide behind MPSC and Public Act 233 needs to understand something. They don't get to bypass the people. And they don't get to bypass us by burying a clerk extension rubber stamp into our local zoning. Economic development is not a blank check here in Oshtemo. A job is not a bribe for silence. An investment is not a substitute for accountability, and prosperity does not require secrecy. If this BESS project is as good for Oshtemo as its champions say it is, then prove it in the light of day. Strip the unilateral clerk extension powers out of this text tonight. Show us the numbers, show us the contracts, show us the unredacted fire safety metrics and the complete technical appendices. Show us the guarantees, show us who pays, show us who benefits. And most importantly, protect the people who are paying the ultimate price when something goes wrong. I have a Freedom of Information Act request that I'd like to submit to the board tonight to give to the FOIA coordinator and the township clerk. And it is a public records request for the drafting and origin of the best ordinance clerk extension clause. Thank you.
Karski, and I'm currently running for the 40th District in the State House. I'm coming up here tonight, and I'm going to repeat this website, stopbess.org, stopbess.org. BESS Failure Incidents Database tracks publicly documented U.S. stationary utility scale and commercial industrial battery energy storage failure incidents. Prior incidents highlight persistent safety and failure risks associated with BESS operations. San Marcos, California, fire, January 21st, 2026. Warwick, New York, fire, multi-day, December 19th, 2025. Glendale, Arizona, fire, October 1st, 2025. Boulder City, Nevada, fire, September 23rd, 2025. Parkfield, California, fire and evacuation, August 30th, 2025. Hillsboro, Oregon, fire, May 22nd, 2025. Moss Landing, California, fire, major, January 16th, 2025. Escondido, California, thermal, runaway, and smoke, September 5th, 2024. Santa Ana, California, thermal smoke event, January 17th, 2024. San Diego, California, gateway fire, multi-day reignition, May 15th, 2024. Kearney Mesa, California, equipment fault, overheating, system failure, April 29th, 2024. Melba, Idaho, fire, October 2nd, 2023. Valley Center, California, fire, September 18th, 2023. Shellmount, New York, fire and toxic smoke, July 27th, 2023. Warwick, New York, thermal runaway smoke, June 27th, 2023. Warwick, New York, equipment fault, thermal event, June 26, 2023. East Hampton, New York, fire, May 31st, 2023. East Hampton, New York, system shutdown, post-fire at substation, January 30th, 2023. Millville, Pennsylvania, fire, January 30th, 2023. Moss Landing, California, fire suppression system failure, September 20th, 2022. Yellowstone, Wyoming, fire, September 6th, 2022. Rio Dell, California, explosion and fire, August 3rd, 2022. Chandler, Arizona, fire, April 18th. Valley Center, California, fire, April 2nd, 2022. Moss Landing, thermal runaway, February 2022. Multiple U.S. equipment faults in 2022. And then the final one, 2021, July 19th, LaSalle, Illinois, fire. All of these all these places have municipal governments there. I'm sure they all have some 50,000 word documents that they read. at some point like we're doing right now. I'm just suggesting that we don't need it here in Oshtemo. And I would just like the board to consider just evacuating this whole plan. Thank you.
No, go ahead.
Yvonne Haystack. I live at South Second Street. I am 3/4 miles between the proposed BESS site. My brother has 12 acres. He has farmhouse and barns, and it literally horseshoes right around him. So I have a very invested interest in this. First of all, I do want to thank you this last year. I know you guys didn't think that you'd be working so hard on things that was unknown to most of us. And I read through the proposed ordinance, and I seen all the emails on the end from us, from Oshtemo. And I was really encouraged. I've been to a lot of the meetings, I've been to our community rallies, and I come away thinking, there's no way this is going to pass. Everything that Katie and her team has done, there is no way this is going to come here. And then I read the ordinance and think, oh, they can do that. Yep, they can do that. They can do that. Listening to you tonight, and thank you for going through this. I know it's a lot. Got a couple questions that you can let me know later. Page 15, no more time, letter I, 24 months. Why are we making it easier? Let's make this hard for them. I want them to look at this ordinance and say, oh man, this is way too much work. They're way too stringent on this. Let's go somewhere else where it's not so hard. Why make it easy? 24 months? No, make it hard for them. And then another one where the 1 mile, let's see, what was that? Page 6, 13F, 1 mile. Well, if they have a fire, we got to evacuate for 8 miles. So why don't you put 8 miles in there? And last night, I could not even sleep. I asked my husband, I was up all night. I'm still worried about this. My brother's family's right there. I'm just a little ways away. This is something that is affecting our health, our mental health here. It's a worry, like that guy just said, our representative maybe. Look at all the fires. This is something that's really concerning to us that live here in Oshtemo. And just real quickly, is there any chance that we could get community members to help you with your draft as you go? And I realize this is just the first draft. We have had people who have put so much time and energy in, and I know they've emailed you a lot of their things. Can't we have a community helping you do this? Someone who really has a vested interest, a neighbor of this. Maybe they're working a little bit harder to find legalities and different things than you would because some of you don't live around here, and that's fine, but take advantage of our neighbors who are working so hard to help you. And then, make this hard. These people are not our friends. The developer who wants this, they are not our friends. They are not our neighbors. They are here to make a profit. That's all they care about. And they're going to lie to you. They're going to tell you everything. Oh, that was another thing. On page 11, 6.4, assurance. Give us an assurance. No. Spell out what we want. Don't just say, oh, give us an insurance. Sure, you got my word. No, they're going to lie to you guys. They're going to lie to all of us. That's what ITC did when they put in that monstrosity that they call the substation over there. And then lastly, I want to remind you, I know that you are hired in and you work at Oshtemo. You work for Oshtemo. We are Oshtemo. We don't want this. And I think we have a lot of good ground to make that happen.
First of all, I want to thank you for posting the ordinance early so that we could all have a chance to take a look at it. And then also thank you for reading through this line by line because it is brutal for you and us to hear, but I think it's the best way to go through it with a fine-tooth comb. So thank you for doing that. I do have a lot of questions, but I want to focus tonight on one point that shows up twice. First, right at the beginning, in the first paragraph, that says, TBD, zoning districts in which to allow utility scale systems. And then again, at the very last sentence in the ordinance, it circles right back to the same point. Number 3, determine which districts to allow the different principal use energy system as a special use. I feel like the entire 38 pages hinges on that first and last point, and I truly hope that the next draft reflects the fact that Oshtemo has already chosen an appropriate zone for these projects. It's an area where the city water is available to residents, mitigating the concern for contaminated wells and aquifers. It's an area that is already dedicated to development of this scale. In fact, it's an area that is currently subjecting residents and non-residents to the threat of toxic gas release because a BESS is already installed in it. This area is by the industrial zone on the east side of Oshtemo Township and the Colony Farm substation where the Parkview BESS is located. One of the first lithium-ion battery storage containers in Michigan, right here in our township. I'm curious how many people who live in that area even know that it's there. Installed in 2018, it wasn't subject to such public knowledge and scrutiny. And it invalidates the argument that a BESS can't go in the industrial zone. Clearly, the zone was chosen, approved, and remains 8 years later despite growing concerns around lithium-ion batteries. Eagle has this cool map function where you can place a droplet of rain on a map and watch where it runs through the rivers. If you place a drop of rain on this Van Cal property directly on the headwaters of the Paw Paw River watershed, the map will show you how it runs through Van Buren County, Berrien County, and out to Lake Michigan. If you look at a zoning map for Almena, the highest density of residents is along the eastern border and the southeast corner, right where Hayden Creek comes in from the Van Cal headwaters. The river follows along through township after township, following that droplet of contaminated rainwater, heading west all the way out to Lake Michigan. That's on the map from Eagle. Even if the developers could possibly claim to contain all water on the site, there is no containing toxic gases that blow up in the wind and come down on a nearby property. What goes up must come down, and only God controls the wind and the rain. It doesn't stop at the edge of the Oshtemo Township map. So if we're actually going to utilize heat maps to minimize the population affected by this, then that will need to take into consideration the population affected in all of these other townships down the line. If we are actually using that logic, I guarantee that the head count of affected people will be higher for a BESS on the headwaters than in an industrial zone where they have a water treatment plant to protect their drinking water. As a mom of 2 boys, I am conditioned to think proactively and catastrophically in order to keep the 2 of them alive, and I'm sure that you guys can relate. That is how we need to prepare this ordinance and place the BESS in the safest place where there already is one, in the industrial zone. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Kevin Gall. My wife and I live in Alameda Township, where I own an engineered products manufacturing business. I'd like to address the first draft of this township's energy system ordinance. If you want to create an effective WIO and be responsive to PA 233's ridiculous limitation on the use of pragmatic local knowledge for zoning and siting of ESS equipment, you've got more work to do, right? Let's look at dates. August 22nd, 2024, the township's planning director ostensibly advised this commission of the need to develop the renewable energy ordinance. Jody Staforia's advice included, there is interest in developing a BESS in the township. 12 months later, August 14th, 2025, energy speculator New Edge Power made a presentation of shiny technology in search of a problem to this commission. November 25th, 2025, moratorium imposed on commercial energy storage. July 31st, 2026, draft 1 of an ESS is issued. For more than 2 years, you've needed to develop an energy systems ordinance. Meanwhile, the lack of information provided to citizens is best compared to an iceberg watch. Very little is visible above the surface. can't help but wonder about the intrinsic details that lie below. Interestingly, a second memo on August 22nd, 2024, from Jody to this commission discussed the ongoing comprehensive plan activities for that month. Having started in May 2023, the Master Streets and Comprehensive Plan was adopted in May 2026. That sublime iteration took 3 years to produce. 3 years to accomplish a normal and routine community planning effort, which has been required since 2008 under the Michigan Planning Enabling Act. So when a shift from the sublime to the ridiculous is needed, it probably should take more time to develop a correct and effective response to PA 233. Now, consider that a boilerplate route to a state-issued certificate entitles the MPSC to other information as reasonably required. Well, a township that wants to defend home rule should also be entitled to other information as reasonably required in a customized and protective WIO. Let the incompatible portion of your reactive ordinance be a codified statement that honors your pledge to protect and defend the public, to solidify their trust in you. In regards to your agenda packet today, starting on page 7, Jody Staforia's memo states, in part, take as many meetings as necessary to review, receive public comment, and consider further edits. Attention thus far has been focused on West Side, but ordinance must consider entire township. Also, it appears planning staff have suggested moving the mapping exercises earlier in order to inform the process. For reference, the township is 36 square miles, 6 by 6. Mapping includes no less than sensitive lands, natural features, and water resources within 1 mile of the township's border. Arguably, that 1 mile border increases your advisory footprint to 64 square miles. That calculus will appropriately dip into all neighboring townships as well as Van Buren County, a mere fraction of the concerned community, truly the local affected unit. Also in
Your time limit is up, please. Thank you.
Miller. I'm a resident of the city of Plainwell, and I came here because we are going through similar processes in terms of Gunplain Township. I've also been to a meeting in Cooper Township. I have friends who live here in Oshtemo Township. So I just want to kind of add on to what I think her name was Bonnie asked for earlier, as well as my friend Dr. Finden in an earlier meeting for citizen input. Several months ago, things were very contentious in Gunplain Township. And just to give you a little idea, if you're not staying up on what the neighboring townships are doing, we do have a BESS application and a BESS ordinance. The ordinance was read into the record before I got involved, so I missed this part of it. But we have a 1-year data center moratorium to give us time to research and have conversations about that ordinance. And to make good use of that time, we asked the township board for an ad hoc committee, which they liked that idea. They took it to the planning commission. So that ad hoc committee is made up of 2 township board members, 3 residents, and was intended to have 2 planning commission members, but they could only find 1. So everyone agreed that we could take the next alternate on like the residents list. So it'd be a total of 7, so you wouldn't have like, ties or, kind of like stonewalling or whatever. And also, there's a group of us doing research so that we can inform those 3 or 4 residents who are sitting down in the ad hoc committee. They haven't started meeting yet, but I can tell you that over time, because the township and the planning commission started to listen to us and to our the high emotions and the upset and everything, there's a lot less yelling. In fact, I think almost no yelling. And there's been talk tonight about trust, so the trust has increased, the relationships are better. So I just recommend that, it's working, I think, in Gunplain Township. So if there's some way that you can structure it because obviously, residents come up here and make comments, but it's not a dialogue. And this is a very long process to write something like this. So I just wanted to say that real quick. Thanks.
Katie Meyer Tepper, Sky King 2, and Bonnie Castle Lake. I'm going to read the rest of Kevin's message because I think it's applicable. Also, in this draft's general provision section B3F, a qualitative assessment is required on the effects of a proposed BESS on the social well-being, equity, health, and safety of residents within 1 mile of the site. Nope, there's a bigger iceberg out there. That health and safety assessment should analyze an area equal to the mapping exercises. At a minimum, place a center point over any proposed site for a BESS, then extend out 6 to 8 miles in all directions. Sampling within that range will give you a far better perspective of collective expectations and how the continued well-being of this community should really be measured. And then I'm going to shift to something totally different. This is the tribal engagement that must be restored as a separate requirement. So on packet, page 14, section 49.290.b.3.d. Sorry, guys. Tribal consultation appears only as something to be documented inside the environmental site assessment. There is no separate requirement that the developer actually engage tribal governments as part of the application process. That becomes even more obvious in section 49.290.b.3.i on the same page. Oshtemo lists the agencies the developer must consult before submitting an application: DNR, SHPO, Eagle, MDARD, the Drain Commissioner, County Health, Road Commission, MDOT Utilities, and others. Tribal governments are missing from that list. Later, the draft mentions tribal historic preservation offices in the unanticipated discoveries plan, but that is essentially a contact requirement for after cultural resources or human remains are discovered. That is not meaningful upfront tribal engagement. The MPSC treats tribal engagement differently and more seriously by making it a separate application requirement. Under the MPSC's PA 233 application requirements, section 6.3.45, Exhibit A45, summary of tribal engagement, the applicant must document communication with each tribe when it occurred, who participated, the input received, and the outcome. Importantly, the MPSC places tribal engagement under local outreach, separate from environmental compliance. Oshtemo should not weaken that standard. And this matters particularly here. Oshtemo Township's own history says the name Oshtemo is thought to come from a Potawatomi word meaning headwaters, referring to the headwaters of Arcadia Creek. The Nottawasapi Huron Band of the Potawatomi also describes the Kalamazoo River watershed as part of its traditional territory and speaks to the river's importance to tribal lifeways and traditions. So please do not reduce tribal governments to a line buried inside an environmental study and a phone number to call after something is dug up. Give them a place in the process from the beginning. And tribal engagement as its own required application exhibit, at least equivalent to MPSC Exhibit A45. Require the developer to document which tribes were contacted, when they were contacted, who participated, what concerns or recommendations were raised, and how the project responded. Do not cut tribal governments out of the independent review process. This land and these waters have a history that began long before Oshtemo Township existed. They deserve meaningful engagement, a place at the table, and respect. Thank you. And I have one for all of you.
I've got a little something I want to read for you. It just goes along the lines with the draft we're going through line by line tonight. And it said, so we need to let our county officials and professionals do the jobs they were elected or hired to do. And this appears throughout the ordinance, beginning with the agency consultation requirements in section 49.290.b3 and continuing through the drainage, groundwater, roads, fire, and emergency response sections. Kalamazoo County is not simply another neighbor. In May, the Michigan Court of Appeals held that PA 233's definition of the affected local unit is geographic and includes all local units of government in which any part of the facility is located, whether or not that government has zoning authority. For a project in Oshtemo that includes Kalamazoo County, Michigan courts, and the county already has people whose jobs involve many of the protections that this ordinance is trying to create. The drain commissioner is an elected county official. His office handles stormwater management, flood control, soil erosion prevention, and the county's soil erosion permitting program. Our water is his business. The drain commission should also be able to use the developer-funded escrow to hire the technical experts needed to review this project. Applicable permits must be obtained before qualifying earth changes begin. The county emergency management coordinates resources for local jurisdictions before, during, and after large-scale emergencies, and specifically works with county hazmat, consolidated dispatch, the sheriff, the road commission, local fire departments, and municipalities. Environmental health has its own land, water, wastewater inspection, laboratory, permitting, and emergency response expertise. Some of these professional roles also risk being weakened by the way Oshtemo's proposed environmental Article 160 shifts decisions towards township administration. This may create a tenable risk. So please stop treating evidence of consultation as the end of the process. If an agency issues a permit, require the permit. If it has expertise Oshtemo is relying on, require a written review, finding, or approval, and give those county professionals the ability to identify additional studies or expertise they need. The township staff can administer the application where they should not replace the county professional responsible for the subject. Doing that can create unnecessary safety risk and unnecessary financial liability for the township. And the appropriate parts of every energy storage system applicable should be formally routed as applicable to the drain commissioner, county enforcing agency, emergency management, county hazmat, environmental health, road commission, consolidated dispatch, 911, and the sheriff, where traffic evacuation, access, or security is involved.
Your time is up.
Can you hear me okay? There we go. My name is Tony Sabat. I live directly adjacent to the proposed BESS property. I appreciate the hard work staff has put into draft one of the energy systems ordinance. However, there is, if we begin reviewing this 38-page text tonight, there are 6 critical gaps that must be addressed to protect our rural neighborhoods, private drinking water wells, and township finances. First is the acoustics in section D.3.n. While 30 dBA at the property line is a good baseline, the text lacks any protection against continuous mechanical tones. We need an explicit +5 dBA penalty for any prominent, discrete tones or low-frequency hums, along with the requirement for a mandatory annual post-construction sound monitoring for ongoing compliance and enforcement. Second, containment and water protection, section D.3.I and J. Families along rural corridors like South Van Cal rely entirely on private drinking wells Firefighting operations during a thermal runaway event will drop tens of thousands of gallons of toxic runoff laced with hydrofluoric acid, heavy metals onto permeable sandy soil. The ordinance must explicitly mandate 100% impermeable engineered secondary containment basins beneath these facilities and legally require dedicated on-site emergency water storage tanks where no municipal hydrants exist. Third, for setbacks, section D.3.m, dropping non-participating residential property line setbacks to just 300 feet is far too small for a 260 megawatt hour facility with thermal plume off-gassing risks. We ask that the residential property line setbacks be increased to at least 1,000 feet. Fourth, emergency notifications, section B.3.p. While the draft mentions community notifications, it sets no defined geographic boundary. We ask that you mandate an automated 2-mile emergency public notification system that alerts both Oshtemo and cross-border Almena residents within 15 minutes of any thermal runway or chemical off-gassing event. Fifth, zoning placement. I think somebody already said this, but page 9 note, on page 9 the draft lists permitting zoning districts as TBD. Principal use BESS must be restricted exclusively to I-1 and I-2 heavy industrial districts, such as the established corridors along Stadium and North 9th Street, where heavy infrastructure and municipal water already exist. They do not belong on agricultural or rural residential land. And then 6, host agreements and revenue protections, section B.3.w and X. Standard industrial property tax depreciates rapidly while the facility generates massive profits, like we mentioned earlier. The township must mandate a binding host community agreement indexed directly to annual gross revenue generated. Because a host agreement is a voluntary civil contract between the developer and the township, the state cannot supersede or strip away these agreed upon terms. So if a developer wants to operate here, they must be on these non-negotiable terms. So, thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Rob Morrison, and I'm an Oshtemo resident. First of all, I appreciate the work the Planning Commission and staff have put into this draft, the advance notice and multiple opportunities to provide input. I also appreciate the prompt filling of my FOIA request for information on the township's consultant, his contract fee, and his report. I hope the township can charge the consultant fee to a developer at some point. That'd be great. I have been in communication with the regulatory expert in California who lives in Moss Landing, the site of a devastating BESS fire. His name is Philip Karenko, Senior Compliance Engineer for SpaceX. He is well qualified to provide expert assistance on energy ordinances and help write California's BESS ordinance as part of a clean energy permitting playbook, and has offered to have a conversation with Attorney Porter about our ordinance, and he is not going to ask for a fee. I've had conversations with him, and I'm going to share some of the insights. I don't have a written copy, but I'll be emailing this commission with full information, including sources. Mr. Karenko did review the Oshtemo draft energy ordinance, and I'm going to share some of those observations. His extensive experience with energy ordinances and real-life situations, I think, can be a great benefit for us. I think one of the most significant observations he has and recommendations is that we should separate the BESS, solar, wind, and hybrid requirements. He recommends we do not bundle them together and do not forget to address hybrids. So he says we need to have separate ordinance for these. And his rationale for that is the current ordinance contains very different technologies in one section. We should create separate technology-specific sections with a short general section for requirements common to all facilities. So BESS-specific protections cannot be confused or diluted by solar and wind provisions. Bundling can create loopholes when everything is a general use. Also, we should require them to comply with the latest published standards and to update those when they are updated. The developer also should provide monthly audit reports for all operations and emergency responses for the township, which will be made public, and require monthly audit reports, and also to impose fines when those are not available. Today, he forwarded to me a report that was also sent to Supervisor Bell, so you'll be seeing that. It's a gap analysis of 2 documents, the BESS consultant report that we have, and then also his BESS ordinance he wrote for California. So for example, in setbacks, he says that if you have, since you have to align with PA 233, he does understand Michigan law, and you're going to submit a CREO eligibility. He said what we can do is retain authority to require greater distances when supported by standards and plume toxicity modeling. So we can use reports from other experts to get beyond what the MPSC and PA 233 require. Also, I do have a question is, from an early discussion, when did this body approve the consultant? I found out that the consultant charges $600 an hour to review records. He supplied 20 hours of that work and was paid $12,000 on February 28th. So we have experts who are willing to work with us for free in the community and outside, so I do recommend that we take advantage of that. Thank you very much.
That was really excellent. My name is Miranda Vinden, Dr. Miranda Vinden, and I'm a resident here in Oshtemo. And I work in the pharmaceutical industry, and I think of you guys as like a health authority. So FDA, EMA, TGA, there are these organizations across the globe that if we want to manufacture a drug in their or sell a drug in their country, we comply with their regulations. And so to me, this ordinance is like that regulation. And there's things I would like to see in here that echoes the previous comment of having very specific guidelines for meeting environmental contamination, the kinds of testing that's required for particular contaminants, and they might be different for a solar project versus a wind project versus a battery system. And echoing back to Moss Landing, if you read all the stuff online about it, there's a lot of people fighting about, oh, there's, you know, they didn't meet a certain contamination level, it wasn't so bad, and someone else says, no, actually, the contamination was terrible. And part of it's because they don't have specifications that are clear, and that's something I'd like to see in our ordinance, like very specific guidelines of the kinds of testing that would be required if an adverse event happens. It's kind of like a stability protocol in the event that your facility destabilizes, which we have in the pharmaceutical industry. So I would just like to see that beefed up because I want to see the data and I want to benchmark with reasonable standards. And you guys can set that tone and say, this is what our level of acceptable whatever environmental contaminants would be. But that would require, you consulting with chemists and environmental experts, in addition to aligning with government regulations on contamination for environmental events that happen. So there's that. The other thing I wanted to add was there was a reference here to like protecting tax value. And I wasn't certain if that was like the protection of the tax value for residents surrounding the facility in the event that their land becomes devalued because of the BESS facility, or if that was protection of that land specifically that the BESS is proposed to be on. So that would be good to clarify. And then the other thing is in the annual report, we do annual reports all the time with health authorities. I'd like to see a requirement for inspection history and any inspections that are done independently and the adverse findings and responses from an agency. So I don't know what agencies inspect this. I know you have a third party, kind of consultant that's going to be engaged, but I think it's really important for them to be incredibly transparent for, what are they doing well, things that have worked, and again, their adverse events that they've caught, and the corrective actions that they've implemented to stop, to make it better and make certain those problems don't happen again. So, thank you.
Hi there, my name is Christy Miller. I'm an Oshtemo resident, and I'm going to address some specific language in the draft that I think is too vague, so that's my concern today. Vague words are not standards. We should require proof, not opinions. I want to flag language beginning on page 14, section 49E, because these words, I have it cited in what I'm going to give you. Because these words determine whether the Planning Commission receives real evidence or simply a developer's opinion. The draft repeatedly uses phrases like qualitative assessment, evidence of consultation, should, and minimize to extent practicable. Those phrases sound protective, but without objective requirements behind them, they create discretion and loopholes. The MPSC provides the right comparison. Yes, it uses qualitative land use review, but when something can be measured, modeled, tested, engineered, or permitted, the MPSC requires the technical evidence such as sound modeling, hazard mitigation analysis, stormwater information, permit status, and other supporting documents. That should be Oshtemo's rule as well. Qualitative assessment can supplement technical evidence, but it cannot replace it. In the same section, the draft says conflicts from noise, dust, traffic, and visual impacts must be minimized to the extent practicable, but noise and traffic are measurable, dust can be evaluated, and visual impacts can be analyzed. And minimized to the extent practicable cannot become a substitute for meeting the special use standards. If a project cannot meet the standards for that location after mitigation and redesign, the answer can still be no. Again, in the same section, health and safety are addressed through a qualitative assessment. That is not enough for a BESS. We have NFPA standards, hazard analysis, fire modeling, and emergency response planning. The MPSC requires technical documents for those issues. Then on page 15, the ordinance asks for evidence of construction with evidence of consultation with EGLE, the Drain Commission, Environmental Health, MDOT, and others. But I want to point out that consultation is not approval. I can call my doctor, ask whether I should quit drinking coffee, hear yes, hang up, ignore it, and now I have evidence of consultation, but that does not mean my doctor approved of what I'm doing. When farms in the same community went to sell from their front yard, they have to provide proof that the road commission approved their driveway and traffic access. A utility scale energy project should not get a weaker standard. The MPSC again provides a better model. It requires consultation records showing who participated, the correspondence, the necessary permits, the next steps, timelines, and separately requires permit list and status. Oshtemo should do the same. The rule should be, I'm skipping ahead now. The rule should be simple. If it can be measured, measure it. If it can be modeled, model it. If an expert can make a technical determination, require it. If an agency has approved authority, require the approval. And thank you for hearing my consideration.
Hello, my name is Sharon Kelly. I'm an Oshtemo resident, and I would also like to thank the board for all their hard work that they're putting in for this ordinance. And I would also like to echo some of the statements from my neighbors here that we're hoping that this ordinance can be as specific as possible, and as much as we can not have any loopholes, we would like to have that. And so in that light, I'm just here tonight to talk about more of a specific testing, and this is what I'm referring to is the testing of the energy systems that are going to be installed, and that making sure that what we test is going to match the system that we're actually going to install. And I'm referring to the energy storage system safety testing requirements in the packets on pages 34, 35, and 36, 49.290, point D, point 3, point E through F. The ordinance already requires that UL 9540A testing, which is good. It already requires that. The UL 9440A sounds technical, but the basic idea is simple. It's a nationally recognized fire safety test used to evaluate what happens when a battery goes into a thermal runaway and whenever that failure can spread. and whether that failure can spread. The testing can be used to evaluate things like enclosure design, separation distances, and fire protection systems. That makes this testing too important to be brushed off with vague words like representative, comparable, or equivalent. This exact issue came up during Abandonment Township's recent BESS review. The developer wanted the ability to use comparable energy storage systems. The question from the reviewers was essentially comparable in what way? This is a good question for Oshtemo too. In the packet, page 34, Oshtemo allows the testing of a full-scale system or a representative system configuration acceptable to the township. But later, on pages 35 and 36, the draft uses stronger language requiring the testing for as applied configuration and installed system configuration. We would like to keep stronger language and define what representative means. Little differences can make a big difference. A battery may have the same chemistry or come from the same manufacturer, but have a different cell, a different module, enclosure, energy density, spacing, cooling system, ventilation, or fire suppression system. Those differences can affect the conditions the fire testing is supposed to evaluate. UL itself recognizes that large-scale testing involves a representative ESS, making it important for the township to establish how that determination is made. What should change? Require a simple test versus proposed comparison showing whether a system proposed for Oshtemo differs from the system that was actually tested, including the cells, modules, chemistry, enclosure, energy density, spacing, cooling. If there is a difference, an independent fire protection process safety engineer experienced with utility scale engineering storage should determine in writing whether this test still applies and explain why. The ordinance, the simple rule should be the fire testing must apply to the energy storage system Oshtemo actually approves and the developer actually installs. Comparable is not enough unless the qualified
Your time is up. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Andrea Lundgren. I'm a resident here in Oshtemo. And I'd like to start off saying that this draft ordinance so far, it really shows a lot of work went into this, and it's evident. But we're here to work on it and improve it, and there's several places to improve here. The draft with, after comparing this draft with the MPSC application process, other township reviews, industry and technical guidance, Michigan law, and the work already done by experts, two problems show up. There's some missing information here that you should be considering. And the ordinance often requires a technical study or decision without clearly identifying who is qualified to review it. Some of the missing materials that you should be able to consider that aren't included in this draft, some maps, which Jody has referred to. Missing maps include sensitive land uses, natural features, water resources, agriculture, and other conditions. Those maps were not included for your use. Section 49.290.B.3M refers to a stormwater management plan pursuant to Article 161. That wasn't included in the ordinance materials, and that should be something that you should be able to review. Same issue with 49.290.B.3.N that requires a groundwater contamination risk assessment and spill contingency plan. That provision was not included in your materials as well. The fire provisions reference Appendix B but that too is not included, nor is the sound appendix. And these aren't minor, these are important pieces of information that you need to reference to approve this ordinance. So if these maps, articles, appendices, standards, and planning aren't relied upon to determine ordinance language, the Planning Commission and the public need to review it. It should be part of this as a transparent plan. Second, the Planning Commission will rely on expert support it deserves. The MPSC does not expect one planner, one clerk, one fire official, commissioner to become an expert overnight. And the MPSC has 9 divisions and staff specializing in engineering, law, economics, finance, and accounting, and technical support. I have a list here of experts that you could be and should rely on. My time's running out here, but I have a packet that I can share with you, and you can review them.
And I'm an Oshtemo resident also. And I'm going to talk quickly about the closing the 10% change loophole that's in the draft. If you want a reference point for it, section D.3.Y-BB is where it's located at. On this, the Energy System Ordinance draft allows an ESS to be changed without a new site plan if it remains within the same footprint. It then says modifications that increase an ESS facility footprint or total energy capacity by 10% or more requires a new site plan and special use approval by the Planning Commission. The next provision requires battery or transformer replacement and increase in energy capacity to be reported in writing to the township clerk and/or designated personnel. The problem is that the change that could be under 10% can still have major technical change. A different battery model, a higher energy density, different enclosures, different cooling systems, transformers, fire systems, controls, or operating characteristics could change fire behavior, sound and water needs, plume impact, cybersecurity, emergent response, and assumptions without adding 10% to the footprint or capacity. And staying on the same footprint does not mean as staying at the same risk. A 10% rule measures size, it doesn't measure the risk. The ordinance needs to cover both. The ordinance should state the 10% threshold may be automatically triggered for full Planning Commission review, but anything below 10% is not automatically a minor change. The clerk may receive and route the notice, but she should not determine whether a technical change is safe or material. Any proposed change must be returned to the qualified expert or agency that reviewed the affected issues when it was altered. And it could be equipment or battery configuration, UL testing or hazardous mitigation analysis, fire explosives behavior, fire water or contamination, groundwater or drainage, plume modeling, sound, emergency response, cybersecurity, or other assumptions or conditions relied upon versus the original approval. If the change touches on a line item in the original approval, it must be returned back to the Planning Commission before it's implemented. This is a rule carried out over for all special use projects. This certainly doesn't get a free pass. A simple overriding rule: a modification should not be considered minor solely because it remains within the existing footprint or increased facility footprint or energy capacity by less than 10%. Materiality shall be determined by whether the change affects the approved study, safety analysis, environmental impact, emergent response assumption, ordinance standards, or conditions of the approval. And another thing, just in general, and a general comment, you were talking about the replacement of the fire equipment and stuff.
It should, in my opinion, should be listed within the ordinance that it's a requirement that the development company pay for all those expenses, be it a consultant fee, be it any kind of expenses associated with this. In the ordinance, when you read it, it basically says it's kind of like assumed. It shouldn't be assumed, it should be a requirement. Thanks.
Pam Garrissey, I'm actually an Almena Township resident, just across the border on Van Cal. And I wanted to deal with their, especially crop farm, it's on page 4, the definition, and this definition should be corrected because Oshtemo is confusing a federal land classification with a crop type that fills produce sections and supports Michigan's economy in a major way. That distinction is not minor. When the legislature wrote PA 233, it did not treat all farmland as interchangeable. It specifically required the MPSC to determine that a project will not unreasonably diminish farmland, and specifically called out farmland dedicated to the cultivation of specialty crops. There is a reason. Michigan is second only to California in the diversity of crops it produces, and MDARD describes crops such as apples, cherries, and blueberries as the backbone of Michigan's diverse agricultural economy. Michigan's food, agriculture, and forestry exports reached a record $2.9 billion in 2024. The legislature and the MPSC clearly recognize that specialty crop agriculture deserves specific consideration. These are farms producing food for people and supporting an important part of Michigan's agricultural economy. That is why there's a problem and why getting this definition right matters. USDA, MDARD, and federal law define specialty crops by what is grown. Oshtemo is instead using USDA's definition of unique farmland, the land that crops sit on, to determine what qualifies as specialty crop farm. Those are not interchangeable. The experts define a specialty farm by what it produces. Oshtemo describes characteristics of the land. If Oshtemo wants to identify unique farmland, it can define that separately, but it should not substitute that land classification for the definition of a specialty crop farm when USDA, MDARD, and federal law already provide a clear crop-based definition. There's also a second issue that must be addressed. A specialty crop farm should not be allowed to lose its intended protective status simply because production stops while an energy project is being assembled. PA 233 specifically calls out farmland dedicated to specialty crops when determining whether a project will unreasonably diminish farmland. That protection is defeated if a specialty crop operation can remove its specialty crop, stop farming, and then argue that the land is no longer producing specialty crops because it is being converted to an energy facility. A cherry farm should not be able to remove its trees in anticipation of solar development and then claim that it no longer is a specialty farm. That turns the protection on its head. The very act PA 233 is supposed to evaluate, the loss of specialty crop agriculture to energy development, becomes the reason the land no longer receives protection. The ordinance, therefore, needs to look at the documented agricultural history of the property, not just what happens to be growing there on the application date. There is a strong objective basis for doing that. USDA itself uses the 5 most recent years of cropland data layer history to determine cultivated land status, rather than relying on a single year snapshot. Oshtemo should use the same basic historical approach to protect Southwest Michigan's specialty crops. Use an approach that current specialty crop production.
Your time is up.
I do have handouts then.
Brian, Oshtemo Township. I just want to talk about what we've done so far in this ordinance work. If you believe that a large-scale battery storage system has no place in Oshtemo Township, ordinance is critical for each and every one of us. And I think that when we write this, what I'm seeing so far tonight is we need to be a lot tougher. This has got to be much more demanding of our developer. Words like assurance and commitment should be requirement. Should always be shall. Evidence of consultation shouldn't be, yeah, we talked with somebody. There should be sign off. If you're going to consult with a local organization about your development, then that organization should sign off on that. And the same goes with the required studies. We should be doing studies for the building and operation of the BESS, and those studies should be related to safety, environmental, wildlife, short and long-term health, groundwater, air, noise. These studies must be presented to local and state subject matters experts who will sign off on those studies to assure legitimacy and accuracy. We cannot allow these developers to say, yeah, I talked to so-and-so and they're fine with it, or we did this study and it's all okay. We need people in Michigan and in Kalamazoo County to sign off on those studies. And we also need to do full-scale studies for a failure of a BESS system, because BESS systems are known to fail catastrophically. And those studies should talk about a failure of a BESS system and the impact on safety, environmental, wildlife, short and long-term health, groundwater, air, noise, emergency response, and evacuation. And these studies must be presented to local and state subject matter experts who will sign off on them to assure accuracy and legitimacy. I think we also need to be talking about, as time goes on, the required funding, guaranteed funding for site cleanup upon failure and decommissioning, which we're talking about. I think we should consider area home market value reductions that are due to BESS and funding for that. Area home insurance premium increases due to BESS and funding for that, and loss of home, equipment, livestock, land use, and all costs associated with the BESS failure. There are many residents of Oshtemo and surrounding townships that can help us in developing this and work on this ordinance. We need to listen to them. We need to gather ideas. My biggest concern is I'm not sure how you're doing that. We've had people talk about very specific things, things that should be changed in this ordinance, things that should be added in this ordinance. And I don't see anybody taking notes, and I don't know how you guys are going to take this information, evaluate it, and use it to improve this draft. I mean, I know I'm not supposed to ask the question, but how are you going to do that? All the stuff talked even just tonight, is that written down somewhere? Is that, you got them? Okay. Question answered then, thank you.
In fact, I'm very grateful for all the handouts.
My name is Eric Weathers. I'm an Oshtemo resident, and I do appreciate all the effort that's going into this. This is a very overwhelming process, and just thank you for what you've done here. I don't have any comments of my own. What I'm going to do is finish the comments that Pam Garrissey had cut off due to her time limitations, so I will be brief. Pam was going to go on to state that the ordinance, therefore, needs to look at the documented agricultural history of the property, not just what happens to be growing there on the application date. There is a strong objective basis for doing that. USDA itself uses the 5 most recent years of cropland data layer history to determine cultivated land status rather than relying on a single-year snapshot. Oshtemo should use the same basic historical approach to protect Southwest Michigan's specialty crops. Uses an approach that current specialty crop production qualifies immediately, while land documented as specialty crop farmland within the preceding 5 years retains that status. Otherwise, the ordinance creates an incentive to stop farming first and apply second, which defeats the very reason PA 233 and this ordinance recognize specialty crop farmland in the first place. Please do not allow Oshtemo's ordinance to provide loopholes that weaken Michigan's economy and lessen protections for the important farms that feed our community. Update the definition and add historical preservation. Recommended ordinance updates include update the definition, specialty crop farm, land used for the commercial cultivation or production of specialty crops, including fruits, vegetables, tree nuts, dried fruits, horticultural crops, and nursery crops, including floriculture, consistent with the definition used by the United States Department of Agriculture and the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development. 2, add to the ordinance, for the purposes of this ordinance, land shall also retain specialty crop farm status if documented specialty crop production occurred during the preceding 5 years. Temporary cessation of production following change in ownership or subsequent change in agriculture use shall not eliminate specialty crop farm status established during that historical period. Thank you.
And this is all very confusing. There's so much to read and so much to take in. At the end of the day, I think when you look this over and think about it in your mind, it should say to you, what's in this ordinance that makes New Edge want to go away? What have we written in there that is so stringent that they're going to say, we don't want to do this here anymore? That's what you need to look for. There are so many things that we've told you to do and work on and add and words to change and things to do, but what will it be that they will say, we're going to look somewhere else? This is too hard for us. It's too much. There's too many things that we will affect here, including all the things we've listed over and over, from the bird sanctuary to the fish hatchery to our farms. All of that is important. So that's the thing to keep in your mind. What will make them say, see ya? Thank you.
Oshtemo resident. It's important that things are black and white. There's no gray. Any gray is an opportunity to slip through. Current draft 49.290.b.3.l, packet page 16, energy draft page 8. The current draft requires a mitigation plan if the project is expected to interfere with television, microwave, agricultural GPS, military radar, radio reception, or weather and Doppler radar. Radio reception is great, but you also need to be able to send as well as receive. So let's keep the existing protections, but change radio reception to radio reception and radio communication. Amateur radio, public safety, and emergency communication depend on the ability to transmit and communicate. Let's also add the MPSC style requirement for an independent pre-construction baseline study and require the developer to fix any interference that their systems cause. So suggested language, section L, signal interference. The applicant shall, at its expense, retain a qualified independent third party to conduct a pre-construction study establishing baseline radio reception and radio communication conditions in the vicinity of the proposed energy system. If the energy system is reasonably expected to impact television signals, microwave signals, agricultural GPS, military defense radar, radio reception, or radio communications, or weather and Doppler radar, the applicant shall provide a plan to minimize and mitigate that impact. If the operation of the energy system causes interference with radio reception or radio communication, the owner or operator shall, at its expense, investigate and correct the interference and restore the affected reception and communication to at least pre-construction levels. Information concerning military defense radar that is exempt from disclosure under the FOIA shall remain protected as provided by law. Wind energy systems shall also provide evidence of prior consultation with nearby communication tower operators, including those of the United States Department of Defense. And why? The current language only protects radio reception. It should not leave out communication side of radio, including amateur radio operators and emergency communications. The MPSC already requires a developer-funded third-party pre-construction radio reception study for wind projects and requires the developer to pay to correct any interference that it causes. Oshtemo should use that same basic protection for all principal use energy systems, document conditions before construction, measure those conditions at the neighboring properties, and if the project causes interference afterwards, the developer fixes it, not the residents. And measurements is something to note. We talk about measurements multiple times in the ordinance, but the ordinance doesn't say where the measurements are going to be taken. Are you only taking them on the actual proposed property? Are you taking them at the surrounding neighbor properties? We mentioned sound, but there's a lot of other things other than sound that we need to measure with this. A lot of the text, it does mention that there are various appendices that are not included yet. I think after those appendices are released, the text that mentions the appendices needs to be reviewed again. Thank you.
Good evening, Katie Schneider. In 3 days, I will have been up at this podium for 1 year. 1 year ago, we learned about this. We learned about all of this. My husband laughed at me today. I had to break out the Trapper Keeper because I've used up 4 2-inch ring binders of information about BESS and solar. I'm going to spare you guys of going through every single page of all the notes, every Post-it note on everything. I know Al would not like this, but I would love to have stopped on every page and said, hey, anybody have any comments? Because my 4 minutes can't even start to cut into this. A couple of our neighbors from other townships have been up here, and I'm grateful that they made the trip. We've been to other townships too, and we've learned so much from each other. I can tell you in every township, there's at least one Katie. Usually because it's in their yard, and they know how inappropriate that is. They know when they looked at their deed talked about agriculture living next door to them, and they were fine with that. They were fine with manure. They're fine with the noise. They're fine with the tractor driving in the middle of the night and your dog barking, because they know it's temporary. But they know their deed didn't say they're going to live next to an industrial project, and so they've stood up. And that's why I've stood up. That's why my husband stood up. That's why all of these people are here tonight. There's so many other places you guys would rather be. There's so many other things I'd rather be reading than this. So I'm not going to read what I wrote because my neighbors have dug in, and they've already said what I was going to say. And that's amazing. I love that people have dug into this, and I'm also sorry for you guys. This isn't the funnest subject. Technical things are not my world. Anybody who knows me will tell you that. Even though I have a technical job, this isn't my thing. My biggest thing is details. There are significant wording loopholes in this ordinance. Significant. Attorney Porter will tell you, Litigation cases are won and lost on simple words and the simple ways that people consider them. There are big words, and I know that they're taking notes, so they have most of those words. But I'm happy to send an email of every page of every section of every word that is a litigation loophole. I can tell you from reading this ordinance is very workable, and that is an absolute shame. That is a shame for our community. It's also a shame that we were not allowed to form a committee. Because you're right, those 4 binders sitting at home could have been pretty useful in stopping this project. There are major ways that you can prove that something is inappropriate. I can tell you there's about 40 different townships that are working on this right now. I can tell you that there are attorney firms out there that are working with 30 and 40 different projects, and they are learning every day with every phone call, with every email on what to watch out for. So I've got about 26 more seconds left to try to help you guys. My last thing would be from Tuesday's meeting, what we learned at that. We just talked about the tax money coming in. We certainly do not need this to become an IDD, and then we get even more taxes cut. There's a loophole in the tax language in this as well. That's all I have. I will write you a couple more novels.
All right, seeing no one else coming up, oops, sorry, forget it.
Good evening, and thanks to the Planning Commission for all the work you've already done. I've heard several times about collaboration. Our friend from Plainwell mentioned that just tonight, and I've heard it just a good number of times. And I'm going to suggest that we have in this group, in the 64 square miles, we have electrical engineers, we have medical doctors, we have pharmaceutical persons, and collaboration with a consortium of citizens and you guys would be something I believe would be well worth pursuing. The information in Katie's Trapper Keepers and beyond is voluminous, but the incredible amount of research that this group alone has done makes us the smartest in the township. Well, in any event, it makes us well informed because this group has interest in doing that research. In sharing that with you folks in a more formalized manner, in my belief system, it truly makes sense that rather than have 4 minutes of building a position that meets our developers' needs in the opposite direction, 4 minutes doesn't really cut it. A session with any one of us or a couple of us at a time to assist in that process is what I would propose and strongly suggest that we embrace. Thanks for listening.
All right, seeing nobody standing up, coming towards the podium, I'm going to declare the public comment session now closed. It's 9:23 p.m. Next thing on the agenda is planning commissioner comments. Does any of the commissioners wish to make a comment?
I do. First, I'd like to thank the work that went into this document. A lot of work went into this, a lot of time went into this, and the people who did a lot of the work don't often get the compliments for it. I also would like to thank the public for the comments that were given. They were thoughtful and heartfelt comments, many of which, as you can see from the draft document, previous comments have been included in it and will be included as best we can. You know, we're all just like you. We're citizens trying to do our best up here, and I appreciate the grace that you demonstrated this evening. So thank you to everybody.
Anyone else? All right, Jody, moving on, to item number 8, are there any updates or any other business we should be aware of?
No, but for the public, we can pick this up again on your meeting of September 10th, because we have 3 public hearings at your next meeting this month, so we won't have time for a work session. Sorry, I didn't say that into the mic. We'll pick this up again on September 10th.
All right, it is now 9:25. All agenda items being completed, I declare this meeting adjourned.